Hey there, tonight we're diving into the unvarnished world of Egyptian royal women's hygiene, where beauty rituals included crocodile dung and donkey milk. What you're about to discover might challenge your notions of ancient elegance. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. Let's dive into the world of ancient Egyptian royal women, where the glamour of gold and the allure of lapis lazuli met the earthy reality of, well, crocodile dung. Yes, those same regal figures who inspired awe with their monumental tombs and lavish lifestyles also had some rather unsavory beauty secrets. In a land where the sun was relentless and the sand endless, maintaining appearances was no small feat, and the royal women did it with a blend of opulence and, let's call it, eclectic hygiene practices. Now let's get one thing straight. These ancient Egyptian queens and princesses didn't wake up flawless. They had a little help, okay, a lot of help, from their cosmetic arsenals. Cleopatra, the poster girl for Egyptian beauty, wasn't just dabbing on some drugstore mascara. No, her beauty routine was more involved and a bit more, shall we say, organic. For instance, crocodile dung was a hot commodity in beauty circles, touted as a skincare miracle. It was mixed into face masks, presumably with the hope that its earthy qualities would somehow imbue the user with a youthful glow. Talk about a commitment to skincare. But this wasn't just a case of ancient desperation. There was a method to the madness. The Nile River, the lifeblood of Egypt, played a central role in shaping these beauty rituals. Its muddy waters were both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the Nile's annual flooding brought nutrient-rich silt that was great for agriculture. On the other hand, it made bathing a rather gritty affair. Without the modern miracle of indoor plumbing, royal women and commoners alike had to make do with what they had, which often meant a quick dip in the less-than-crystal-clear waters of the Nile. It's no wonder they turned to other substances to help them achieve that coveted clean feeling. Speaking of substances, let's not forget about the economics of beauty in ancient Egypt. The royal court had access to the finest imported cosmetics, but they didn't come cheap. Frankincense and myrrh, used in perfumes and oils, had to be brought in from far-off lands like Punt, an expedition that could stretch over 200 miles. These were not your average grocery store finds. The cost of these luxury items was high, and only the wealthiest could afford them. For the average Egyptian, beauty was less about imported luxury and more about making do with local resources, like the aforementioned dung. Yet despite, or perhaps because of their fragrant beauty regimens, Egyptian royal women were the paragons of style, their influence reaching across millennia. They set the trends with their elaborate wigs, heavy kohl eyeliner, and intricate jewelry. The royal beauty standard was a mix of elegance, mystery, and a touch of the bizarre. It's no wonder Cleopatra has been immortalized as the femme fatale of antiquity, even if her rumored milk baths might have been more about necessity than luxury. But let's not get too swept away in the romance of it all. Beneath the coal and gold, there was a reality that wasn't all perfumed oils and rose petals. The imported beauty products were as much about status and wealth as they were about personal care. This was a society where your appearance was a reflection of your power and influence. In a world where the pharaohs were considered gods on earth, keeping up appearances was part of maintaining the divine order itself. So, next time you slap on a face mask and complain about the smell, think of those ancient Egyptian queens who paved the way with their bold, albeit slightly pungent, beauty choices. They walked a fine line between grandeur and grit, proving that beauty has always been a little bit messy, and occasionally it smells like crocodile dung. And speaking of fragrant beauty regimens, let's swap the earthy allure of crocodile dung for another well-told tale, Cleopatra's legendary milk baths. Ah, the image of Cleopatra luxuriating in a tub of creamy milk. It's the stuff of legends, right? But hold your horses, or should I say, hold your camels, because the reality is less about luxurious spa days and more about necessity meeting a dash of marketing genius. First off, let's consider the logistics. The idea of filling up a bath with milk sounds more like a dairy farmer's nightmare than a daily indulgence. In ancient Egypt, milk wasn't exactly flowing from the Nile. In fact, it was quite the commodity. Cattle were status symbols, not just sources of endless milk jugs. So, unless Cleopatra had a secret dairy farm stashed away, the practicality of indulging in daily milk baths is pretty questionable. Now, it's true that milk, specifically sour milk, has exfoliating properties due to its lactic acid content. But before you start picturing Cleopatra as the original spa influencer, remember that milk was likely used sparingly. A splash here and there might have been more realistic, maybe mixed with other ingredients like honey, which was more abundant. The milk bath myth, though, is one of those tantalizing, romanticized stories that stick. It's like the ancient world's version of a viral beauty hack, but with a bit more moo and a lot more mystery. But let's not stop at dairy. Cleopatra's vanity table was a veritable apothecary of ancient cosmetics, and not all of it was as benign as a splash of milk. Enter stage left, lead-based makeup. That's right, the ancient Egyptians might have been ahead of their time in many ways, but when it came to cosmetics, they were playing with fire, or rather, lead. This toxic metal was a common ingredient in their makeup, particularly the white lead paste used to achieve that pale complexion so coveted by the elite. Why lead, you ask? Well, in a world before Instagram filters, enhancing one's appearance was all about finding that elusive glow, and lead did just that, albeit temporarily. It provided a smooth, almost ethereal finish. But here's the kicker. It also slowly poisoned the wearer. The health impacts of lead poisoning are well documented today, and they include everything from neurological issues to kidney damage. Yet back then, beauty trumped health, often with tragic consequences. And just like any good beauty product, lead-based makeup had a strong marketing push behind it. Ancient Egyptian society was no stranger to the power of advertisement. Artists and scribes were the original ad execs, crafting alluring messages that promised eternal beauty and divine allure. The idea was that by using these cosmetics, you weren't just enhancing your appearance, you were aligning yourself with the gods. Who wouldn't want to buy into that? This connection between beauty and divinity was crucial. In a society where the pharaoh was considered a living god, mirroring his or her divine attributes wasn't just about vanity, it was a political statement. Your face was a billboard for your status, power, and connection to the divine. And if a little lead could make you look more like the goddess Hathor, then so be it. Of course, all this came at a price. The cost of beauty in ancient Egypt wasn't just paid in silver and gold, but in health, and sometimes life itself. Lead-based cosmetics were the ultimate double-edged sword. They promised beauty, status, and a certain ethereal appeal, but delivered a slow, insidious decline. Yet, despite the risks, the allure of these ancient beauty products was undeniable. The marketing of these items was not unlike modern-day beauty campaigns, albeit with a more celestial twist. They didn't just sell you a product. They sold you a dream of divine beauty and eternal youth. So, as we peel back the layers of Cleopatra's beauty routine, it's clear that the line between allure and agony was as thin as the kohl eyeliner that rimmed her eyes. These ancient beauty practices weren't just about appearance. They were deeply woven into the fabric of Egyptian society, reflecting its values, aspirations, and, yes, its myths. And while the myth of milk baths and the reality of lead makeup might seem worlds apart, they both paint a picture of a society that valued beauty as much as it did power. Cleopatra and her fellow royal women weren't just queens of Egypt. They were queens of their own carefully crafted narratives. They understood the power of image, the allure of myths, and the harsh realities that lay beneath the surface. As we wrap up this chapter of our journey through ancient Egyptian beauty practices, it's clear that the story is far from over. There's more to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more gritty realities to reveal. So, stay with me as we continue to unravel the opulent yet perilous world of Egyptian royal beauty. The Nile's secrets are still flowing, and we're just getting started. With Cleopatra's allure firmly in view, let's pivot from the cosmetics counter to the political chessboard, where beauty and power played a high-stakes game that'd give any modern political drama a run for its money. The ancient Egyptian royal women weren't just beauty icons. They were power brokers, wielding their looks like diplomatic weapons, in an era where alliances were as fragile as the papyrus they were inked on. To understand the political pressures these women faced, we need to acknowledge the relentless court of public opinion that surrounded them. In a society where the pharaoh was both king and deity, royal women were scrutinized not just for their fashion sense or beauty regimens, but for their ability to represent the divine order. Their appearance wasn't merely a personal choice. It was a public duty, a statement of stability and divine favor. If a queen looked radiant, the guards must be smiling on Egypt, right? And if she didn't, well, let's just say the gossip mills of Memphis would have something to chew on. Now, let's talk about how these women used their appearances to forge alliances and secure power. Take Cleopatra Roman 7, for instance. The one, the only, the Cleopatra. She was no naive ingenue waiting to be swept off her feet by a Roman general. No, she was a savvy political operator who knew the value of a well-placed eyeliner wing and a strategically timed smile. Her legendary affair with Julius Caesar wasn't just a scandalous headline. It was a calculated move to secure her throne and Egypt's independence. Cleopatra knew that aligning herself with Rome's most powerful man could keep her enemies at bay and her kingdom intact. When Caesar met Cleopatra, it wasn't just a clash of empires. It was a masterclass in political seduction. And then there's the tale of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, another chapter of political theater wrapped in romance. While the duo is often cast as star-crossed lovers, let's not forget the political calculus at play. By joining forces with Antony, Cleopatra aimed to cement her power and protect Egypt from the expanding Roman Empire. Their relationship was as much about mutual interests as it was about affection. Cleopatra brought wealth, resources, and the promise of Egyptian support to the table, while Antony offered the military might of Rome. In this high-stakes game, love and politics were inextricably linked. But Cleopatra wasn't the only one playing the beauty politics game. Long before her, Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's most successful pharaohs, used her image to assert her authority in a male-dominated world. Hatshepsut wasn't content with just being a queen consort or regent. She declared herself pharaoh, adopting male regalia and being depicted with the false beard of kingship in statues and reliefs. Her decision to present herself as a male ruler was a strategic move to solidify her power and legitimize her rule in the eyes of both her subjects and the guards. This intertwining of beauty and power was further reinforced by the economic realities of the time. Egypt's wealth was often tied to its ability to trade, and royal marriages were a crucial part of securing those trade routes. A well-crafted alliance could open up new markets and bring in valuable resources, while a poorly chosen match could lead to war and economic ruin. Royal women were at the heart of these negotiations. Their unions often brokered like treaties. They were not just marrying men. They were marrying kingdoms with all the wealth, power, and politics that entailed. Let's not forget the role of beauty in diplomacy. When foreign dignitaries arrived at the Egyptian court, they were met with a spectacle of opulence designed to impress and intimidate. The royal women, with their elaborate wigs, dazzling jewelry, and meticulously applied cosmetics, were part of this display of power. Their appearance was a visual representation of Egypt's wealth and sophistication, a carefully curated image meant to convey strength and stability. But behind the glittering facade, there was a harsh reality. The pressure to maintain these beauty standards was immense, and the consequences of failing to do so could be severe. A queen who lost her allure could quickly find herself out of favor, her political influence waning as her looks faded. In a world where alliances were built on appearances and political fortunes could change overnight, maintaining one's beauty was as much a survival strategy as it was a matter of vanity. This wasn't just a matter of personal grooming. It was a full-time job that required a team of attendants, access to the best resources, and a hefty budget. The cost of maintaining such an image was staggering, and it was a price that not everyone could afford. Cleopatra's famed beauty wasn't just the result of good genes and a penchant for milk baths. It was the product of a well-funded operation that included imported cosmetics, skilled artisans, and an unwavering commitment to the cause. And yet, despite the high stakes and the high costs, the allure of beauty as a tool for power continued to captivate the royal courts of Egypt. The myths and legends that surround these women are a testament to the enduring appeal of their stories, stories that blend romance with reality, myth with history. As we peel back the layers of these ancient beauty practices, we find a world where the line between appearance and power was as thin as the gold leaf that adorned their temples. So, As we continue our journey through the world of ancient Egyptian beauty, let's remember that these women were more than just pretty faces. They were power players, political strategists, and masters of their own narratives. Their beauty was not just a personal asset, but a political tool, wielded with precision and purpose in a world where the stakes were as high as the pyramids that still stand in their honor. As we move forward, we'll delve deeper into the stories of these remarkable women, exploring the myths that surround them and the realities they faced. There's still much to uncover, from the role of beauty in the afterlife to the legacy these practices left behind. So stay tuned, because the sands of time have yet to reveal all their secrets, and there's more to this tale than meets the eye. As we wander through the corridors of ancient Egyptian beauty practices, let's pause to ponder how spirituality and hygiene were as intertwined as a pharaoh's headdress. Ancient Egyptians weren't just concerned with looking good. They were on a mission from the gods to stay squeaky clean, or at least as clean as one could get in a world where the Nile doubled as both a bathing spot and the local laundromat. Cleanliness in ancient Egypt was more than just a matter of aesthetics. It was a divine duty. The gods demanded purity, and the Egyptians delivered, albeit in ways that might raise an eyebrow or two today. For instance, priests, who were the rock stars of religious life, had a grooming regimen that could rival any modern influencer's skincare routine. They shaved their entire bodies every 2 days and bathed several times a day. If you're wondering what kind of razor could handle that level of dedication, we're talking bronze tools, which were a step up from your standard disposable razor, but probably a lot less forgiving. This obsession with cleanliness wasn't just for those on the temple payroll. The average Egyptian was also expected to keep up appearances in the eyes of the gods. They washed in the murky waters of the Nile, which, let's be honest, wasn't exactly Evian-level pristine. Yet, paradoxically, the river's silt was believed to have purifying properties. This is what we call an ancient spin on multi-purpose. But here's where things get intriguingly paradoxical. While they were busy scrubbing away the sins of the day, Egyptians didn't shy away from using some rather earthy ingredients in their beauty routines. Take the aforementioned crocodile dung as a case in point. Sure, it sounds repulsive, but it was believed to ward off evil spirits and provide a protective layer against the harsh Egyptian sun. If nothing else, it was an excellent conversation starter, or ender, depending on the company. This duality between purity and downright filthiness is echoed in their religious rituals. Take the embalming process, for example, which is a cornerstone of Egyptian spirituality. While the aim was to purify and preserve the body for the afterlife, the reality was a bit more visceral. The process involved removing internal organs, which were stored in canopic jars, and then stuffing the body with natron salts to dry it out. It was a mix of science and spirituality, with a side of the macabre. And let's not forget the iconic kohl eyeliner, staple in every Egyptian's cosmetic arsenal. While it gave them that sultry, smoky eye we all crave, it also served a practical purpose, warding off the harsh desert glare and pesky flies. In a twist that would make any chemist proud, the lead-based kohl had antibacterial properties, which might have actually helped prevent eye infections. So, while the lead might have been slowly poisoning them, it was at least keeping their peepers infection-free. Talk about a trade-off. Now, onto the economics of these rituals. Maintaining cleanliness was more than a spiritual obligation. It was a financial commitment. Perfumes and oils, essential for ritual purification, were costly imports. Myrrh and frankincense had to travel from the land of Punt, a journey that could take months and cost a small fortune. Meanwhile, natron, the mineral salt used in mummification, was abundant in Egypt, but still had to be mined and transported. No small feat in a time when camels were the closest thing to a delivery service. This economic burden extended to the living as well. The wealthy could afford elaborate bathing rituals complete with scented oils and imported soaps, while the common folk had to make do with water and sand. Yes, sand. In a pinch, it was used as an exfoliant, which gives a whole new meaning to roughing it. Despite these challenges, the pursuit of cleanliness and beauty was relentless. It was a reflection of one's status, piety, and quite literally, their standing with the gods. A well-groomed appearance was a ticket to divine favor, and in a society where the afterlife was the ultimate goal, you couldn't afford to be caught with dirt under your fingernails. The paradox of purity amidst filthy practices is one of the many enigmas that make ancient Egypt so fascinating. It's a world where the divine and the mundane coexisted, where the quest for beauty was as eternal as the pyramids themselves. And as we continue to unravel these ancient practices, it's clear that the sands of time have yet to reveal all their secrets. So, while ancient Egyptian royal women might have seemed to live in a world of grime and glamour, their story is far from over. As we edge closer to the final chapter of our exploration, there's still much to uncover about the intersecting worlds of beauty, power, and spirituality in this fabled land. Stay tuned, because the Nile's waters are still flowing with tales yet to be told. And so, as the Nile's waters continue to whisper ancient secrets, let's fast forward to today, where the legacy of Egyptian beauty practices still casts its long, coal-lined shadow. Modern beauty standards were a surprising debt to the pharaohs and their entourage of glamour and grit. From the Isles of Sephora to the annals of Instagram, echoes of Cleopatra's beauty rituals resonate with anyone who's ever wielded a mascara wand or perfected the art of the smoky eye. But before you start crediting Cleopatra as the original beauty guru, let's take a step back and ask, why are we so captivated by these ancient narratives? Why has the allure of a queen bathing in milk or the subtle seduction of coal persisted through millennia? It seems the stories of Egyptian royal women are the OG bedtime stories of beauty enthusiasts worldwide, a mix of fairy tale and cautionary tale, wrapped in layers of gold leaf and embellished with a dash of crocodile dung. The romanticized image of Cleopatra luxuriating in her milk bath is practically a meme at this point, the ancient world's equivalent of a viral beauty hack. Yet, it's a classic example of how our fascination often glosses over the gritty details. In reality, Cleopatra's beauty routine was less about indulgence and more about necessity and strategy. Think of it as the ancient version of fake it until you make it. She wasn't just maintaining her allure. She was playing a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess, where each coal-drawn eye wing was a move on the board. This enduring fascination isn't just about Cleopatra's allure. It's about the way these practices reflect our own beauty standards. Consider the pursuit of the perfect complexion, a quest that's as old as the pyramids and just as elusive. Ancient Egyptians sought the ethereal glow of lead-based makeup, despite its toxic undertones. Today, we might scoff at their use of lead, yet how different is that from our own flirtations with questionable beauty trends? From the Brazilian blowout to the latest chemical peel that's just a little too effective, we're still willing to risk a little for the promise of perfection. And let's not forget the economic context, because beauty has always been a business. In Cleopatra's time, securing the finest frankincense or the purest coal was akin to snagging the limited edition release of the year. It was a sign of status, a reflection of one's place in society. Today, a similar dynamic plays out with high-end beauty brands and exclusive products that promise a touch of the divine. The price tag might have changed, but the allure of luxury remains. The political and social factors that shape these practices are equally significant. Back then, beauty was a public duty, a way to embody divine favor and political stability. Today, beauty standards still carry societal expectations, though perhaps with less explicit divine endorsement. But whether it's an influencer's curated Instagram feed or a magazine cover, the pressure to maintain appearances remains, a testament to the enduring power of image. So, as we peel back the layers of these ancient practices, what can we learn? For one, beauty, much like history, is cyclical. Today's trends have ancient roots, and the struggles of Egyptian queens to balance allure with authority mirror our own battles with self-image and societal expectations. The line between myth and reality is as thin as a layer of gold leaf, and the stories we tell ourselves about beauty are as much about aspiration as they are about history. In the end, the legacy of ancient Egyptian beauty practices lies not just in the products they used or the rituals they followed, but in the stories they left behind, stories that continue to captivate us, challenge us, and yes, perplex us. These tales of opulence and ingenuity remind us that the pursuit of beauty is as old as civilization itself, a timeless dance between nature and artifice, reality and myth. So next time you find yourself caught in the thrall of a new beauty trend, or reaching for that ancient-looking eye pencil, remember the queens who came before. They walked a path of both power and peril, using beauty not just as a means of adornment, but as a tool of influence and expression. And though the sands of time may have shifted, the allure of their legacy remains as captivating as ever. As the Nile continues to flow, so too does the story of beauty, weaving its way through history, from the banks of the ancient river to the bustling streets of our modern world. Your day begins in an 18th century shipyard, where the first thing that hits you is the smell, a heady cocktail of tar, freshly sawn timber, and the salty tang of the nearby sea. You're standing in what could be considered the tech hub of its time, the Silicon Valley of the age of sail. But instead of coding geniuses and sleek gadgets, you have burly shipwrights and massive wooden behemoths in various stages of assembly. Welcome to the world of shipbuilding, where the Royal Navy is churning out over 200 ships during this era, each one a floating fortress ready to extend the reach of the British Empire. It's a place of organized chaos, with timber, rope, and iron scattered about like the ingredients of some colossal wooden stew. You might think of shipyards as romantic places where the spirit of adventure is built board by board. But in reality, it's more of an industrial slog with enough noise to make a rock concert sound like a whisper. Here's a jaw-dropper for you. To build just one ship of the line, the Navy's pride and joy, it takes about 2,000 oak trees. That's right, 2,000. Picture a forest being felled for a single vessel. These ships are the battleships of their time, bristling with cannons and menacing enough to make any enemy think twice. The labor and resources involved are staggering, akin to launching a rocket today, but with a lot more wood and considerably less concern for environmental impact. The scale of this operation is mind-boggling, but that's what the age of sail is all about. Big ambitions and even bigger ships. Shipyards are bustling with activity from dawn till dusk, a hive of craftsmen, laborers, and the odd naval officer strutting about like peacocks. As you navigate through the organized chaos, you'll notice the shipwrights, the real rock stars of this era, who possess the skills to transform raw timber into a vessel that can cross oceans. But before you get too swept up by the grandeur of it all, remember that shipbuilding is no fairy tale. The conditions are harsh, the work backbreaking, and the pay often meager. The allure of the sea might be romantic, but the realities of constructing the means to get there are anything but. It's a world driven by necessity, a constant race against time, and tied to build ships that can withstand the rigors of naval warfare and exploration. Why all the fuss over these wooden leviathans? Well, in the 18th century, naval power equals global power. Control of the seas means control of trade routes, colonies, and by extension, wealth and influence. The shipyard is where these dreams of empire are forged, plank by plank. It's no wonder the British are pouring resources into this industry like it's going out of style. Shipbuilding is a cornerstone of technological and economic growth, a field where innovation isn't just encouraged, it's necessary. From the design of the hull to the rigging of the sails, every aspect of a ship is scrutinized and improved upon. It's a bit like updating your smartphone, except the updates take years to develop and involve a lot more sawdust. As the morning progresses, you'll see how the shipyard is a microcosm of society, a place where different classes rub shoulders, or more accurately, elbow grease. From the gentleman overseeing the operation to the apprentices learning the ropes, literally and figuratively, it's a diverse ecosystem. But make no mistake, this isn't a democracy. The hierarchy is rigid, and the chain of command is as unyielding as the oak beams they work with. The shipyard is a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, a place where the impossible becomes possible. But it's also a reminder of the sheer effort and resources required to maintain a global empire. As the smell of tar and timber fades into the background, you're left with a newfound appreciation for the ships that once ruled the waves and the people who built them. So, as the scent of tar and timber lingers in the air, let's talk about what really greased the wheels of the shipbuilding industry. Money, and lots of it. In the age of sail, constructing a warship was akin to building a skyscraper today, only you're using oak instead of steel and hoping it doesn't capsize during its maiden voyage. A single ship of the line, the kind that would make an enemy fleet wet its proverbial pants, could cost the equivalent of millions in today's dollars. We're talking about an investment so colossal that it makes a Wall Street banker look frugal. Now, Who's footing the bill for these floating fortresses? Surprise, surprise. It's the government, mainly the British Royal Navy, which had a penchant for spending like a teenager with a credit card. The British Empire wasn't built on frugality, after all. The price tag of a first-rate warship in the late 18th century could run up to £100,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $15 million today. And that's just for the ship itself, adding crew salaries, maintenance, and ammunition. And you're looking at an expense report that would make even the most hardened accountant break into a cold sweat. But where do you find the cash to bankroll such maritime marvels? Enter the world of innovative and sometimes downright risky financing methods. Shipbuilding was one of the first industries to tap into what we now consider modern financial markets. Government-backed loans were a common practice, and shipyards often relied on credit, extended by wealthy investors who didn't mind playing a high-stakes game of naval roulette. The risks were substantial. A ship lost at sea didn't just mean a loss of life and resources. It meant financial disaster for those who funded it. Yet, despite the financial gymnastics, the allure of shipbuilding was undeniable. The chance to contribute to an empire's global dominance was a siren call too tempting to resist. Plus, the potential rewards were as vast as the oceans these ships sailed on. Control of the seas meant control of trade routes, and by extension, commerce and wealth. In essence, investing in shipbuilding was like buying a ticket to the world's biggest economic lottery, with the added bonus of cannons and salty sea tales. Now, let's dive into the workforce that made these wooden giants a reality. Picture this, a bustling shipyard teeming with thousands of workers, each playing a unique role in the grand maritime tapestry. At the top of the skill tree, you've got your shipwrights, the rock stars of the shipyard, whose craftsmanship could mean the difference between a seaworthy vessel and a very expensive pile of driftwood. Then there are the carpenters, blacksmiths, and sailmakers, each bringing their own expertise to the table, or rather the dark. But it wasn't all skilled labor, far from it. For every artisan, there were scores of unskilled laborers, the unsung heroes who provided the muscle for this Herculean endeavor. These were the folks hauling timber, hammering nails, and sweating buckets under the relentless sun. It was a gritty, grimy affair, and the work was anything but glamorous. In fact, it was downright dangerous. Accidents were common, and safety regulations were as non-existent as Wi-Fi in the 18th century. But the promise of steady work and a wage, albeit a modest one, kept the workforce coming back day after day. The logistics of sourcing materials was another Herculean task. Remember those 2,000 oak trees per ship? They didn't just magically appear in the shipyard. The wood came from all over, with forests in England and Ireland being prime contributors. But it wasn't just local resources being tapped. The global footprint of shipbuilding was massive. Timber came from the Baltic, tar from Sweden, hemp for ropes from Russia, and iron was often imported from as far away as the New World. It was a logistical ballet that required precise coordination, not unlike a military operation. And let's not forget the political context. The stakes were high, and so were the tensions. Nations eyed each other warily across the seas, their navies a tangible expression of their power and ambitions. The shipyard was where these ambitions took shape, plank by plank, sail by sail. It was a time when the world was both expanding and shrinking as new trade routes opened up and empires vied for dominance. The ships being built were not just vessels. They were symbols of national pride and power, and the shipyards were the crucibles where these symbols were forged. So, as you stand amidst the cacophony of hammers and saws, take a moment to appreciate the sheer scale and audacity of it all. These shipyards were the engines of empire, the places where wood, metal, and human sweat were transformed into instruments of exploration and conquest. The age of sail wasn't just about adventure and discovery. It was about the raw, unyielding power of economic and military might. The romance of the sea may have captured imaginations, but it was the harsh realities of shipbuilding that made those dreams possible. Stay tuned, because this journey is far from over. So here we are, in the belly of the proverbial beast, where the clang of metal and the groan of timber aren't just the sounds of shipbuilding, but the symphony of a burgeoning empire. Welcome to the 18th century geopolitical chessboard, where a ship isn't just a ship. It's a pawn, a rook, and sometimes a queen in the high-stakes game of global dominance. The age of sail wasn't merely about cruising the high seas. It was about building the kind of naval muscle that could flex across continents. Think of it as the original arms race, only instead of nuclear warheads, you've got cannonballs and a lot of bravado. At this point, you might be wondering, what made these wooden Goliaths such a big deal? Well, in the political arena of the 1700, naval power was the ultimate status symbol. Forget designer clothes. If you really wanted to flaunt your wealth and influence, you'd invest in a fleet that could cast a shadow over the 7 seas. The Royal Navy was the Instagram influencer of its time, setting trends in naval warfare and making sure everyone knew who was boss. If your country wasn't in the shipbuilding game, you were basically the kid left out of the coolest club in school. But let's talk about the folks who made this grand vision a reality, the shipbuilders. Picture a motley crew of artisans and laborers, each with a role as crucial as the next. At the top of the food chain were the master shipwrights, the Leonardo da Vincis of the dockyard. These guys had the know-how to transform raw wood into a seaworthy masterpiece. But don't let the romantic notion of artistry fool you. This was no leisurely stroll through a Renaissance fair. It was a grueling grind, with shipwrights working long hours, often 6 days a week, and sometimes even sleeping in the shipyard to keep up with demanding timelines. And then there's the darker side of the labor force, the pressed men. In an era where personal freedom was sometimes as elusive as a unicorn, the practice of press ganging was rife. If you were a healthy young male and found yourself near a port town after a few too many pints, you might wake up the next morning conscripted into the Navy or, worse, the shipyard. The allure of the sea wasn't so much a siren call as it was a mandate, enforced by a burly officer with a penchant for signing people up against their will. Still, pressed labor wasn't all doom and gloom. For many, it was a chance to escape poverty, see the world, and maybe snag a bit of adventure along the way. The shipyard was an ecosystem of opportunity, albeit one with more splinters and fewer safety nets. Skilled workers could make a decent living, and there was a certain pride in contributing to something as grand as a ship of the line. After all, these vessels were the pride of the nation, and working on one was akin to being part of a blockbuster movie production, minus the red carpet. The political ramifications of shipbuilding were as layered as the hulls of the ships themselves. Nations like Britain, France, and Spain weren't just building ships, they were crafting empires. A robust navy allowed for the protection and expansion of trade routes, which in turn filled the coffers back home. It was a virtuous cycle of economic growth fueled by naval supremacy. The more ships you had, the more trade you could control, and the more trade you controlled, the richer and more powerful you became. It was like Monopoly on steroids, with each ship a hotel on boardwalk. Now let's debunk a few myths. We've all heard the romantic tales of swashbuckling sailors and noble captains steering their ships into the sunset. The reality, the life of a sailor was brutal. Cramped conditions, disease, and the constant threat of battle made for a less than idyllic existence. And as for those gallant captains, many were more concerned with keeping their crew in line than exploring new worlds. Mutiny wasn't just a plot twist in pirate movies. It was a genuine fear, driven by the harsh conditions and even harsher discipline aboard naval vessels. But back to the shipyard, where political intrigue was as much a part of the landscape as sawdust and sweat. Governments poured resources into these endeavors, knowing full well the strategic advantage a powerful navy provided. The shipyard was a hub of innovation, with naval architects constantly tweaking designs to gain even the slightest edge over rivals. It was a world where technology met politics, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. In a sense, it was like the space race of its time, with nations striving to outdo each other in a bid for dominance. The social dynamics in the shipyard were as complex as the ships themselves. Hierarchies were rigid, with a clear delineation between the skilled and unskilled, the paid and the pressed. Yet, despite the disparities, there was a sense of camaraderie born from shared hardship. In the end, everyone was working towards a common goal, the successful launch of a vessel that would carry their nation's hopes and ambitions across the globe. As you watch the shipbuilders toil away, you can't help but marvel at the sheer audacity of it all. Here was an industry that wasn't just building ships, it was constructing the very foundation of empires. The age of sail was a time when the world was both vast and interconnected, and the shipyard was the nexus where dreams of power and prestige came to life. As the sun sets on another day of labor, the shipyard stands as a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of greatness. But don't get too comfortable. There's still much more to explore in this epic tale of maritime mastery. Stay tuned, because the story of shipbuilding is far from over. As the sun dips below the horizon, the shipyard doesn't just quiet down. It transforms, shifting from a bustling hive of activity to a sprawling monument of human effort and exhaustion. But before you get too caught up in the picturesque scene of a day's end, let's dive into the gritty underbelly of this grand endeavor. Sure, the age of sail might conjure images of dashing captains and majestic ships gliding across the seas, but behind the curtain, the reality was as harsh as a nor'easter. First, let's talk about the elephant, or should I say, the forest, in the room, the environmental cost. Picture this. For every ship of the line, about 2,000 oak trees are sacrificed on the altar of naval supremacy. That's not just a ship. That's an entire ecosystem transformed into a floating fortress. And we're not talking about a one-time deal. The British Royal Navy alone demanded a steady stream of these wooden behemoths, which meant the relentless felling of forests. England, Ireland, the Baltics, no tree was safe from the shipbuilder's axe. By the end of the 18th century, the British Isles were feeling the pinch, with oak shortages becoming a real headache for shipbuilders and a boon for conservation-minded squirrels. Now, onto the shipyard itself, a place where safety measures were as rare as a peaceful mutiny. The work was backbreaking, the conditions dire, and the risks were as omnipresent as the sawdust in the air. Forget about hard hats and safety goggles. The only protective gear around was sheer luck. Accidents were more common than a sailor's tattoo, with workers losing fingers, limbs, or even their lives to the unforgiving machinery and tools. The shipyard was as much a battlefield as the open seas, with casualties mounting not from cannon fire, but from the daily grind of construction. And illnesses, oh boy, they were as frequent as tavern brawls. The combination of close quarters, poor sanitation, and exposure to the elements made for a veritable petri dish of ailments. Speaking of ailments, let's not forget the infamous shipyard cough, a charming little souvenir from inhaling copious amounts of sawdust, tar fumes, and the occasional whiff of lead paint. Respiratory issues were rampant, and the life expectancy of a shipyard worker was often as short as the time it took to build a ship. But hey, at least they didn't have to worry about scurvy. Leave that joy to the sailors. Despite the health hazards, the allure of steady work kept the labor force coming back, driven by necessity and the hope of a better life, or at least a fuller stomach. Now, let me shatter another romantic notion, the idea of a unified, harmonious workforce. The shipyard was a melting pot of social strata, but harmony, not so much. The hierarchy was as rigid as the ship's mast, with shipwrights and skilled artisans at the top, and unskilled laborers and pressed men scraping the bottom of the barrel. It was a world where knowing your place wasn't just advisable, it was mandatory. Yet, amidst the sweat and toil, there was a grudging respect for the skills and tenacity required to turn raw materials into ocean-crossing vessels. Economic realities also played a part in shaping this maritime tapestry. The cost of building a single ship could rival the GDP of a small nation, and financing these endeavors was a high-stakes game. The government and private investors pumped money into shipbuilding like it was an 18th century Kickstarter campaign, hoping for a return on investment in the form of captured trade routes and expanded empires. But with great risk came great reward, or devastating loss. A ship lost at sea was more than a tactical blow. It was a financial sinkhole, dragging investors and naval bureaucrats into its depths. And let's not gloss over the environmental ramifications. As forests were cleared to feed the insatiable demand for timber, the ecological balance teetered precariously. Local wildlife saw their habitats vanish, and communities reliant on the land found themselves in a precarious position. The shipbuilding boom was a double-edged sword, fueling both economic growth and environmental degradation. It was a vivid illustration of the age-old conflict between progress and preservation, a theme still very much relevant today. The political landscape was equally tumultuous, with nations vying for dominance on the world stage. The shipyard was a microcosm of this struggle, where every plank and sail was a testament to national ambition. The ships weren't just vessels, they were pawns in a larger game of geopolitical chess, where a single move could alter the balance of power. The stakes were high. and the pressure to deliver was immense, driving shipbuilders to innovate and adapt in a relentless pursuit of superiority. In the end, the shipyard was a place of contradictions, where grandeur and grit coexisted, where dreams of empire collided with the harshness of reality. It was a world where the line between success and failure was as thin as a ship's hull, and where the drive to conquer the seas was matched only by the human cost of making it happen. So, as you stand amidst the shadows of these wooden giants, take a moment to reflect on the sacrifices and struggles that brought them to life. The Age of Sail may have been a time of adventure and exploration, but it was also a testament to the resilience and resourcefulness of those who dared to dream and build beyond the horizon. So next time you picture a majestic ship cutting through the waves, remember the shipyard, a place where the romance of the sea was tempered by the realities of labor and loss, where the pursuit of power came with a price. And as our story sails onward, there's still more to uncover, more myths to debunk, and more truths to reveal. Stay tuned, because the voyage is far from over. As the shipyard's echoes of hammering and sawing fade into memory, let's anchor this tale of timber and toil in its lasting impact. The Age of Sail wasn't just about crafting majestic wooden leviathans. It was the blueprint for the modern industrial and global trading world we navigate today. These shipyards were the crucibles where today's maritime norms and global economics were forged, shaping a legacy that sails on even as the wooden hulls have long since rotted away. Let's talk legacy, shall we? First up, the Industrial Revolution. Yep, the Age of Sail planted the seeds for the industrial juggernaut we'd later call the 19th century. Shipbuilding in the 1700 was a logistical feat of Herculean proportions, requiring coordination and innovation that wouldn't look out of place in a modern startup. The techniques and processes honed in those gritty shipyards laid the groundwork for mass production, mechanization, and the assembly lines that would define the industrial landscape. Talking about an industry that was, quite literally, ahead of its time. Just swap out your hand tools for power tools, and you're halfway to Henry Ford. And let's not skim over the economic ripple effects. The trade routes charted by these ships weren't mere lines on a map. They were the arteries of global commerce. They turned the Atlantic into a bustling maritime highway, transforming isolated economies into a tangled web of international trade. Goods, ideas, and, unfortunately, diseases crossed oceans with unprecedented speed, reshaping societies in their wake. The legacy of these routes is still visible today, with modern shipping lanes tracing the paths first blazed by those wind-powered behemoths. But here's a twist. While the myth of the Age of Sail is all about freedom and exploration, the reality was far from romantic. Sure, these ships opened up the world, but they also closed the noose on colonial expansion and exploitation. The Age of Sail was a double-edged sword, fueling both the spread of cultures and the subjugation of entire continents. It was a time when the world shrank, but not necessarily for the better. So while we might swoon over tales of dashing explorers and noble adventurers, let's spare a thought for the less glamorous truth. These ships also carried the chains of empire. Now onto maritime law, because nothing says legacy quite like legalese. The high seas were a wild west, and the Age of Sail helped tame it, establishing the rules of engagement that govern our oceans today. From the law of the sea to the right of free passage, much of modern maritime law has its roots in those tumultuous times. As nations jockeyed for naval supremacy, they also laid the foundations for international agreements that keep today's shipping lanes open and conflict-free. Well, mostly. The cultural impact is another ocean unto itself. The Age of Sail imbued our collective consciousness with tales of adventure, peril, and discovery. From Melville's Moby Dick to Stevenson's Treasure Island, the romanticized image of the sea and its ships continues to capture imaginations. But let's not forget the darker tales, the mutinies, the shipwrecks, the grim realities of life aboard. These narratives remind us that while the sea is a stage for human drama, it's also an unforgiving mistress, capricious as it is captivating. And how about the human cost, huh? Those shipyards may have been the Silicon Valleys of their day, but their success was built on the backs of countless laborers who slogged away in brutal conditions. The legacy of their toil is a sobering reminder of the human price of progress. As we marvel at the audacity of the Age of Sail, we must also acknowledge the blood, sweat, and lives that fueled its rise. It's a legacy of ingenuity and sacrifice, of dreams realized and dreams deferred. In the grand tapestry of history, the Age of Sail is a vibrant thread, weaving together the strands of exploration, exploitation, innovation, and endurance. It's a chapter where the romance of the sea collides with the harsh realities of empire building, leaving behind a legacy as complex as the knots that held those mighty ships together. So next time you gaze at the horizon and ponder the vastness beyond, remember the legacy of those wooden giants and the echoes of their voyages that still ripple through our world today. As we dark this conversational voyage, let's tip our hats to the shipbuilders, the sailors, and all those who dared to dream beyond the shores. Their legacy is the world we sail in today, a world shaped by wooden ships and iron wills. And while the Age of Sail may have slipped below the horizon, its impact remains as enduring as the ocean itself, a testament to the power of human ambition and the indomitable spirit that propels us ever onward. In the dim candle-lit corners of 16th century England, a young Francis Drake was probably dreaming of the high seas, not knowing he'd become the favourite sea dog of Queen Elizabeth I herself. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before the knighthood, before the daring circumnavigation of the globe, and long before he was anointed as a national hero, or pirate, depending on who you ask, Drake's story began on the rugged coast of Tavistock, Devon. Born around 1540, in a time when the average lifespan was barely over 40, Drake had a lot to pack into his years. Growing up, the son of a farmer turned preacher, Drake's early life was as humble as a turnip stew. His family was Protestant, which in those days was a bit like playing for the underdog team in a very heated league. The religious tumult of the Reformation meant that Drake's father was booted from his vicarage, forcing the family to flee to the relative safety of Kent. There they lived in an abandoned ship, an ironic twist for a future sea captain. But let's talk about the real allure of the seas for a young Englishman in the 16th century. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just about the romance of adventure. It was cold, hard cash, or its predecessor, gold and spices. The sea was a highway of wealth, with the Spanish and Portuguese raking in fortunes from the Americas. To the English, those ships laden with treasure were more like floating piggy banks waiting to be cracked open. Enter John Hawkins, Drake's cousin, and one of the more infamous figures of the period, who gave young Francis his first taste of the sailor's life. Now, Hawkins wasn't exactly the sort of guy you bring home to your parents. He was a privateer, which is essentially a pirate with a government license. His business, the triangular trade, and no, it wasn't about geometry. Hawkins's voyages were part of the early English slave trade. In 1567, Drake joined Hawkins on a venture to the Caribbean, where they captured Africans and sold them into slavery. It's a sobering chapter in Drake's life, often glossed over in the tales of derring-do. But it was these early experiences that taught him the harsh realities of sea life and the lucrative, albeit brutal, opportunities it presented. The seas were no picnic. Ships were wooden death traps, with disease, scurvy, and malnutrition as constant companions. Imagine cramming into a space so small that personal space was more of a myth than a reality. The average sailor's diet was a culinary horror show. Hardtack biscuits that were more like rock biscuits, beef so salted it could double as a preservative, and water that was less refreshing and more a breeding ground for bacteria. And let's not forget the delightful prospect of lime juice to stave off scurvy, which wasn't even known about until later, though Drake and his crew would eventually become known as limeys for their citrus solutions. Drake's debut as a captain came not with a bang, but with a series of skirmishes and setbacks. During his early voyages with Hawkins, they found themselves in a sticky situation when the Spanish ambushed them at San Juan de Ulua in 1568. Betrayal, cannon fire, and a hurried escape set the stage for Drake's lifelong vendetta against Spain. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but for Drake, it was more a lifelong buffet. As Drake's reputation grew, so did his ambitions. The world was changing rapidly, with the new world offering tantalizing possibilities. For a man of Drake's daring, the sea became both a stage and a battlefield. Elizabethan England was teetering on the edge of greatness, and Drake was ready to push it over the brink into maritime glory or infamy, depending on your perspective. To Queen Elizabeth I, Drake was the ideal sea dog. He was bold, resourceful, and had a knack for annoying the Spanish, which, let's face it, was practically a national pastime for the English back then. The Queen, no stranger to financial woes herself, saw in Drake a chance to boost England's coffers. And so, with her blessing, he set out on voyages that would weave him into the fabric of history. The era was ripe for myth-making. Drake's exploits would be sung around tavern hearths, his name synonymous with English prowess. Yet behind the tales of gallantry, one must remember the gritty, often grim reality faced by those who sailed beneath his command. Romanticizing pirates is easy, but the truth is that life at sea was filled with peril and moral ambiguity. So, was Drake a pirate or a patriot? It depends on whether you're asking the Spanish or the English. But one thing is clear. His rise from the son of a displaced preacher to England's most celebrated mariner was a testament to his tenacity, skill, and perhaps a touch of opportunistic flair. As we chart the course of his adventures, remember that every legend has its shadows, and Drake's story is no exception. Stay tuned for more high seas drama, daring deeds, and a few cannonballs along the way. But enough about Drake's rise. Let's set sail on his most audacious adventure yet, his circumnavigation of the globe in 1577. This wasn't just a maritime road trip with sightseeing stops, mind you. We're talking about a high-stakes gamble where the chips were England's national pride and a chance to stick it to Spain. Drake's expedition was shrouded in secrecy, approved by Queen Elizabeth herself, although she probably didn't pencil it into her official calendar as Drake's World Tour. Drake set off with 5 ships, but let's face it, calling them ships is a bit generous. They were more like floating wooden coffins. The flagship, the Pelican, which Drake would later rename the Golden Hind, because why not upgrade to something more majestic, was a mere 100 feet long. For perspective, that's about the length of a modern city bus, but with a few more cannons and significantly less legroom. Now, what was the point of this daring voyage? Officially, it was to find new trade routes and explore uncharted territories. Unofficially, it was to plunder Spanish settlements and ships, turning piracy into a patriotic duty. Drake's mission was essentially to be the English mosquito that buzzed around the Spanish Empire, siphoning off as much gold and silver as he could carry. And boy, did he deliver. By the end of this journey, Drake would lug back enough treasure to fill a small castle's worth of chests, boosting England's economy and earning himself a knighthood. Not bad for a farmer's son from Devon. But let's not breeze past the gritty details. Drake's voyage was fraught with peril, mutinies, treacherous waters, and some navigational guesswork that would make a modern GPS unit weep. The first major hiccup occurred in the Magellan Strait, that infamous bottleneck at the tip of South America. Here, the fleet encountered storms so ferocious that 2 ships turned back, and 1 was destroyed. The remaining ships were scattered, and Drake pressed on with just the Golden Hind. It was a test of leadership, and Drake proved he was as tough as nautical nails. Leadership wasn't just about surviving storms, it was also about dealing with dissent. One of the more sinister episodes of his journey was the execution of Thomas Doughty, a nobleman and supposed friend, accused of mutiny. Drake held a trial at sea, which, without the presence of a fair judicial system, was about as impartial as a kangaroo court. Doughty was found guilty and beheaded, an act Drake claimed was necessary for the success of the mission. Whether it was justice or a power play, it remains a grim reminder that life under Drake's command was not for the faint-hearted. As the Golden Hind sailed up the Pacific coast of the Americas, Drake embarked on a series of successful raids against Spanish treasure ships. Here, piracy blurred with patriotism. The English crown turned a blind eye to Drake's methods, as long as the treasure chests kept arriving. Drake's most famous heist was the capture of the Cacafugo, a Spanish galleon laden with gold, silver, and jewels. The haul was so massive that it took 6 days to transfer all the loot onto the Golden Hind. And just like that, Drake's piracy morphed into a patriotic windfall. Yet it wasn't just about the spoils. The geopolitical stakes were high. England was a rising power, eager to challenge the Spanish dominance of the seas. Every ship Drake captured, every settlement he raided, was a direct challenge to King Philip Roman II of Spain. It was an era where national pride and personal profit were intertwined, and Drake was the poster boy for this daring new English spirit. Of course, Drake's voyage wasn't all naval battles and treasure troves. He also inadvertently became a pioneer of some rather dubious cartography. As the first Englishman to navigate the coastlines of what would become California, Drake claimed the region for England, dubbing it New Albion. This was despite the fact that the local Miwok people had been living there quite comfortably without an English landlord. But in the grand tradition of explorers everywhere, Drake planted a flag and assumed that settled it. Drake's circumnavigation wasn't just a physical journey, it was a cultural phenomenon back home. His exploits were celebrated in ballads and tales, transforming him into a national hero. The English public, hungry for stories of derring-do and Spanish gold, eagerly lapped up every exaggerated detail. Drake became an emblem of England's ambition and maritime prowess, a figure whose larger-than-life reputation was as much a creation of the Tudor propaganda machine as it was of his own daring deeds. Yet, amid the legend-making, it's important to remember the harsh realities faced by Drake and his crew. The seas were unforgiving, and the voyage was a testament to human endurance. Disease, hunger, and the constant threat of violence were their daily companions. But this perilous existence only added to the allure of Drake's story. The English psyche was captivated by the romance of the high seas, the notion of transforming piracy into patriotism, of a commoner defying the mighty Spanish Empire. By the time Drake returned to England in 1580, he had achieved the impossible. He was the first captain to complete a circumnavigation with his original ship intact, a feat that earned him a hero's welcome. Queen Elizabeth I herself boarded the Golden Hind to knight him, a ceremony that, let's be honest, was as much about the gold as it was about the glory. Drake's journey was a catalyst for England's maritime ambitions, a spark that would ignite the fires of exploration and empire in the coming centuries. So, was Drake a pirate or a patriot? The lines were as blurred as the maps he used. What's clear is that his circumnavigation not only filled English coffers, but also fueled the nation's imagination. Drake's legacy is a complex web of daring exploits and darker deeds, and as we continue our voyage through history, remember that the seas of the past are as turbulent as the man who sailed them. Stay with me for more tales from the golden age of piracy, where the line between hero and villain is ever shifting, and adventure is just a cannonball away. As the sails of history unfurl, we find ourselves in 1587, a year when Sir Francis Drake decided to give Spain a haircut they'd never forget. Picture this. The Anglo-Spanish War is simmering like a pot left on the stove too long, and Queen Elizabeth has just about had it with King Philip Roman II attempts to dethrone her and restore Catholic rule in England. Clearly, a bit of diplomacy wasn't going to cut it. Enter Drake, England's very own maritime mischief-maker, ready to stir the pot with a bold move that would go down in history as the singeing of the King of Spain's beard. Now, if you're wondering who thought up that cheeky moniker, it was probably some Elizabethan spin doctor with a flair for the dramatic. But let's not get sidetracked by the branding. What really went down was a preemptive strike against the Spanish Armada, a fleet that Philip was assembling with all the subtlety of a Broadway production. Drake's mission was to disrupt this armada before it could set sail for English shores, and what better way to do that than a surprise raid on the bustling port of Cadiz? On April 19, 1587, Drake and his fleet of around 23 ships set sail from Plymouth, primed to make a splash in Spanish waters. Cadiz, a key port in Spain's naval strategy, was bustling with activity, and its harbour was stuffed with ships, supplies, and enough gunpowder to make even the most seasoned pyromaniac blush. Drake's fleet rolled in like thunder, catching the Spanish with their proverbial pants down. Over 2 days, they wreaked havoc, torching over 30 ships and capturing countless barrels of supplies. Imagine lighting a match in a fireworks factory. Drake's raid wasn't just a setback for Spain, it was a public relations disaster. Drake's actions were bold, audacious, and let's be honest, a bit like tossing a hornet's nest at your neighbour's barbecue. But was it all patriotism? Well, hold that thought. Sure, the English crown cheered him on, but beneath the patriotic veneer lay some pretty mercenary motivations. Drake's exploits weren't just about defending England's honour, they were also about pocketing a tidy profit. The captured supplies and ships translated into cold, hard cash, filling English coffers and lining the pockets of investors back home. War might be hell, but for Drake and his crew, it was also a lucrative business opportunity. The raid on Cadiz was a masterstroke of military strategy, but let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. Beneath the dashing tales of daring and defiance was a grim reality. Warfare in the 16th century was brutal and bloody, with civilians often caught in the crossfire. Cadiz, though a military target, was also a thriving city of merchants, fishermen, and families. Drake's raid, successful as it was, left a trail of destruction that would have made even the most hardened buccaneer pause. Yet, despite the chaos he wrought, Drake's reputation only soared higher. The English saw him as a patriotic hero, a man who could thumb his nose at Spain and get away with it. In the alehouses and taverns of London, tales of his exploits grew taller with each retelling, turning Drake into a larger-than-life figure. But as with all legends, the line between fact and fiction blurred. Was he really the gallant defender of the realm, or just a pirate with a patriotic excuse? The raid on Cadiz delayed the Spanish Armada, buying England precious time to bolster its defences. It also sent a clear message to Philip Roman II. England was not to be trifled with, but for all its success, Drake's action was just one chapter in the larger saga of the Anglo-Spanish War. The tensions between the two nations continued to simmer, eventually boiling over with the launch of the Armada the following year. Drake's raid may have singed the King of Spain's beard, but it hardly put out the fire. And oh, the stories that sprang from this fiery episode. Elizabethan England was a hotbed of rumour and exaggeration, where every tale was spiced up for maximum impact. Drake was a master of this narrative game, his own exploits embellished to a point where they danced on the edge of myth. The truth was often a casualty in these tales, sacrificed at the altar of entertainment and national pride. But isn't that the way of all great stories? The more you tell them, the more they grow, each retelling adding another layer of legend. In the end, the raid on Cadiz was more than just a military maneuver. It was a statement of power and ambition. It showcased the audacity and cunning that defined Drake's career, while also highlighting the economic underpinnings of his actions. The romantic image of the swashbuckling hero was juxtaposed against the harsh realities of a world where loyalty and profit often walked hand in hand. So, as we sail onward through the turbulent seas of history, remember that every tale has its shadows. Drake was a man of his time, navigating a world where the lines between pirate and patriot were as uncertain as the seas he sailed. His story is one of ambition, adventure, and a fair bit of opportunism. It's a saga that continues to captivate, where every new wave brings both revelation and mystery. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the drama of the Anglo-Spanish War and the enduring legacy of England's most infamous sea dog. The adventure is far from over, and the best, or perhaps the most explosive, is yet to come. And now, we find ourselves on the brink of the main event, the 1588 showdown that would go down in history as the Spanish Armada's ill-fated attempt to invade England. Picture a clash of titans, but instead of gladiators, you've got warships creaking with cannon fire. This was the 16th century version of a geopolitical chess game, and Sir Francis Drake was about to become England's most famous pawn, or knight, depending on your perspective. Let's set the stage, shall we? It's the summer of 1588, and King Philip Roman II of Spain is fed up with English antics, particularly those of a certain sea dog who can't stop raiding his treasure fleets. Philip, ever the devout Catholic, sees this invasion not just as an opportunity to reclaim control over England, but as a holy crusade to restore Catholicism to its Protestant neighbour. Meanwhile, Queen Elizabeth I, with her sharp wit and even sharper resolve, is rallying her forces to defend her realm and her throne. Enter the Armada, a fleet of 130 ships, armed to the teeth and ready to rumble. The Spanish strategy: sail up the English Channel, rendezvous with the Duke of Parma's army stationed in the Spanish Netherlands, and then ferry those troops across for a full-scale invasion. Simple, right? Well, if there's anything history teaches us, it's that nothing is ever simple, especially not when the English weather and a certain Mr. Drake are involved. Drake, now second in command to Charles Howard, the Lord High Admiral of England, was tasked with leading the English defence. Drake's naval strategies in this campaign are a matter of heated debate. Was he a strategic mastermind or just lucky? The truth is, it might have been a bit of both. But before we get too cozy with the idea of Drake as a tactical genius, let's take a closer look at the chaos of the battle itself. The first encounter came on July 31, 1588, off the coast of Plymouth. The Spanish Armada had formed a crescent formation, an impressive sight, sure, but also a bit like leading with your chin in a boxing match. Drake and his fleet of nimble English ships danced around the cumbersome Spanish galleons like wasps around a lumbering bear. The English had smaller, faster ships equipped with long-range cannons, and they used these to their advantage, peppering the Spanish from a distance and avoiding the traditional close-quarters battle the Spaniards excelled at. Drake's most famous maneuver came not from some grand strategic playbook, but from his own audacious intuition. On the night of August 7, he sent 8 fire ships, essentially floating torches, into the anchored Spanish fleet, causing widespread panic and forcing the Armada to cut their anchors and scatter. In the ensuing chaos, the English pounced, picking off Spanish ships like ducks in a shooting gallery. It was a classic Drake move, bold, brash, and just a little bit reckless. But let's not romanticize things too much. The reality was gritty. Surviving letters and diaries from the time paint a picture of a brutal, exhausting campaign. English sailors, though buoyed by initial successes, were plagued by disease and malnutrition. And the Spanish, for all their disarray, were formidable opponents, their ships bristling with artillery and manned by seasoned sailors and soldiers. As the Armada fled north around Scotland, battered by both English fire and the relentless Atlantic storms, Drake's image as the savior of England began to take shape. It was a carefully crafted narrative, one that glossed over the contributions of other English commanders and the indiscriminate savagery of naval warfare. Drake was transformed into a symbol of English resilience and cunning, a PR triumph for Elizabethan England. But why was Drake's image so meticulously polished? Simple. In a time of religious division and international rivalry, England needed heroes. Drake's exploits were perfect fodder for the Elizabethan propaganda machine, which churned out tales of derring-do that captured the public's imagination. It was an era when the line between fact and fiction was as blurred as the horizon on a foggy day at sea. Yet, for all the glory, the economic realities of the time were stark. England's economy was in a precarious state, and the spoils of naval victories were crucial to its survival. The victory over the Armada, while celebrated as a divine intervention, was also a financial lifeline. The captured ships and their cargoes were auctioned off, and Drake's share of the loot ensured his place among the wealthiest men in England. The Spanish, meanwhile, were left to lick their wounds and rebuild. The defeat of the Armada was a blow to Philip Roman II prestige, but it was hardly the end of the conflict. The Anglo-Spanish War would drag on for another decade, a constant reminder of the simmering tensions that defined the period. So, was Drake a genius, or just a man in the right place at the right time? The answer, like much of history, is nuanced. He was a product of his era, a man who thrived in the tumultuous waters of Elizabethan politics and warfare. His legacy is a testament to the power of narrative, the enduring allure of adventure, and the complex interplay of ambition, opportunity, and sheer nerve. As we continue to navigate the choppy waters of Drake's story, keep in mind that the past is as unpredictable as the seas he sailed. The legend of the Armada is just one chapter in the ongoing saga of a man who defied the odds and became a symbol of a nation. Join me next time as we explore the aftermath of the Armada's defeat and the ripple effects that shape the course of history. The adventure is far from over, and the next leg promises to be as thrilling as a storm on the high seas. With the Spanish Armada defeated, you'd think Sir Francis Drake would sail off into the sunset, right? Wrong. The guy wasn't exactly the retiring type. But let's be real. When you've built a career on daring exploits and high seas drama, what do you do for an encore? For Drake, the answer was straightforward. Keep pushing the envelope until it pushes back. And oh boy, did it push back. Post-Armada, Drake found himself in high demand, both as a naval commander and a symbol of English maritime prowess. He was a living legend, and legends have a way of overstaying their welcome. In 1589, Drake led an ill-fated expedition known famously or infamously as the English Armada. This was supposed to be the grand sequel to his previous success, a bold strike against Spain to keep them on their toes. But instead of fireworks, what Drake got was a damp squib. The expedition was plagued by poor planning, bad weather, and worse luck. Out of the 180 ships that set sail, only about 100 limped back home, with thousands of men lost to disease and combat. It was a catastrophic failure that cost England dearly, both in terms of treasure and morale. Drake's reputation took a hit, but he wasn't done yet. His later years were marked by a series of failed expeditions, each one chipping away at his once unassailable image. In 1595, Drake and his old buddy Sir John Hawkins, yes, the same Hawkins who first introduced Drake to the maritime world, decided to have another go at the Spanish in the Caribbean. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Hawkins died of dysentery before they could even reach the Spanish Main, and Drake's siege of San Juan in Puerto Rico ended in a humiliating retreat. By this point, Drake's golden touch was more like fool's gold. His health was failing, his ventures were floundering, and the once vibrant tapestry of his life was unraveling at the seams. The final curtain fell in January 1596 off the coast of Portobelo, Panama. Drake succumbed to dysentery, a common fate for sailors of his era, where the real enemy was often less the Spanish and more the microscopic. Even in death, Drake managed to make a splash. His body was clad in armor and laid to rest in a lead coffin, then slipped into the sea near Portobelo. Somewhere out there, beneath the waves, lies the final resting place of England's most celebrated and controversial sea dog. A fitting end, really, for a man who spent his life chasing the horizon. But what of his legacy? In the immediate aftermath of his death, Drake was lionized as a hero. His exploits were celebrated in ballads and stories, his name synonymous with English daring and defiance. Yet, like all legends, his story was ripe for reinterpretation. As time marched on, the romantic image of Drake the hero began to fray at the edges. Fast forward a few centuries, and modern historians have taken a more critical look at Drake's life and deeds. Was he a pirate or a patriot? The truth is, he was a bit of both, a man who blurred the lines between privateer and pirate, hero and villain. His raids on Spanish treasure fleets were tantamount to piracy. Yet in the cutthroat world of 16th century geopolitics, such actions were often cloaked in the guise of national service. Drake's impact on British naval history is undeniable. His daring voyages and naval tactics set a precedent for future generations, laying the groundwork for England's rise as a global maritime power. But his legacy is also a reminder of the darker side of exploration and empire, a world where profit and plunder often went hand in hand, and where the spoils of victory were stained with the blood of countless victims. In the end, Sir Francis Drake's story is a tapestry of contradictions, heroic yet ruthless, celebrated yet controversial. His life serves as a testament to the turbulent times in which he lived, a period when the seas were both a stage for adventure and a battleground for power. The romantic allure of Drake's exploits cannot be denied, but neither can the harsh realities that underpin them. As we close the book on his remarkable career, we're left with a man who was as much a product of his age as a shaper of it, a reminder that history, like the ocean, is vast, deep, and full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. So was Drake a pirate or a patriot? Perhaps the better question is, why do we feel the need to choose? His story is richer, more complex, and infinitely more fascinating than any single label can capture. Like the seas he sailed, Drake's legacy is a testament to the power of human ambition, resilience, and the unyielding quest for adventure. And that, dear listener, is a tale worth telling again and again. In the grand tapestry of history, it's rare to find a ruler who could pen a love sonnet with one hand while conquering half the known world with the other. Enter Suleiman, the Magnificent, a man who ascended the Ottoman throne in 1520 at the tender age of 26, ready to make Europe quake and poets swoon. The Ottoman Empire at that time stretched its intimidating, yet oddly artistic, claws from the sun-dappled shores of the Mediterranean all the way to the bustling trade routes of the Indian Ocean. We're talking about an empire that was so vast, it could give a geography teacher nightmares. Suleiman wasn't just inheriting a geography lesson, though. He was stepping into the shoes of a major power player on the world stage. The Ottoman Empire was one of the big leagues, the kind of empire that other empires would invite to their parties, if they weren't too busy being terrified of it. From the palatial luxury of the Topkapi Palace, Suleiman planned his moves with the precision of a chess grandmaster and the flair of a Renaissance artist. Now, the Topkapi Palace wasn't your run-of-the-mill royal abode. Picture a sprawling complex that looked like it was designed by someone who was told to spare no expense, and took that directive very, very seriously. The cost of maintaining this palace could have fed a small nation, but hey, when you're running an empire, why not live a little, or a lot? It was a place where the glitter of gold was only rivaled by the sparkle of intrigue, and where the Sultan's extravagant lifestyle was both a symbol of power and a daily exercise in opulence. Suleiman himself was a bit of an enigma wrapped in silk robes. While he was known as a warrior sultan, leading armies into battle with a flair that would make a Hollywood director blush, he was also a man of letters. His poetry wasn't just an afterthought scribbled between campaigns. It was a genuine passion. Under the pen name Muhibi, meaning lover, he wrote verses that could melt a heart faster than a summer in Anatolia. His work on lawmaking was equally impressive, though perhaps less romantic, earning him the title of Kanuni, or the lawgiver, by those who appreciated a good legal reform. But let's not romanticize too much. Sure, Suleiman's reign might sound like a fairy tale, but it came with its own set of thorns. Running an empire wasn't all poetry readings and afternoon teas. It was a balancing act of politics, war, and occasionally making sure your head didn't roll. His court was a hotbed of political maneuvering, where allegiances shifted as easily as the sands of the Sahara, and where trust was a commodity rarer than the diamonds in his treasury. Yet, amidst the power plays and the poetry, Suleiman had a vision. He saw the Ottoman Empire not just as a collection of territories, but as a world power that could stand toe-to-toe with any European kingdom. And let's be real, Europe was getting a bit too comfortable. The Ottomans under Suleiman were like the ultimate neighbor, a bit loud, a bit terrifying, but undeniably impressive. The challenges were many, and the stakes were high. But Suleiman had the charisma to make allies out of enemies, and the shrewdness to know when a battle would be won better with ink than with steel. His reign was not just a chapter in a history book, but a saga of ambition and artistry, with each day bringing new challenges and opportunities to cement his legacy. So, as the young Sultan sat on his throne in 1520, overlooking an empire that glittered with potential and peril, one thing was clear. Suleiman was ready to make his mark, whether it was with the sword, the pen, or the laws that would outlast them both. And thus began the story of a ruler who, amidst the grandiosity of his empire, found time to be both a conqueror and a creator, a ruler whose vision was as vast as the lands over which he reigned. As Suleiman settled into his role, he quickly realized that ruling an empire wasn't just about wearing fancy robes and having your face on coins. No, it involved a little more grit, a lot more mud, and an army that could move like a well-oiled machine, if only the machine weren't constantly threatened by the whims of Mother Nature. Enter the siege of Vienna in 1529, a grand spectacle of military ambition that seemed to have been planned by someone who thought logistics was just a fancy word for a good guessing game. Now, let's set the stage. Vienna, the jewel of the Habsburg Empire, wasn't just a tempting target. It was the kind of prize that had Suleiman licking his metaphorical chops. But getting there was a bit like trying to organize a parade in the middle of a hurricane. The Ottomans were dragging artillery pieces so hefty, they made modern moving companies look like amateurs. And surprise, surprise, the weather had plans of its own. Rain turned roads into mud pits, not exactly ideal for transporting weapons the size of small elephants. Think of it like trying to navigate a shopping cart through a parking lot during a flood, except replace the cart with cannons and the parking lot with battlefields. Despite the mud and the muck, Suleiman's forces reached Vienna, but the city's defenses weren't made of sugar and spice. They were more like fortified steel and stubbornness. The Ottomans laid siege, hoping to crack open Vienna like a walnut, but the weather had other ideas. Torrential rains turned the siege into a soggy affair, and as anyone who's ever planned an outdoor event knows, rain can really put a damper on things. The weather wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was more like a cosmic prank, with rain turning trenches into moats and supplies into mush. The siege lasted only a few weeks before Suleiman had to make the call to retreat. It turns out that even the most magnificent of sultans can't control the weather. Who knew? The withdrawal was a strategic move, but let's face it, Nobody likes to admit they lost to rain. Vienna remained unconquered, but the psychological shockwaves of an Ottoman army at its gates reverberated through Europe. It was a bit like showing up to a party uninvited and leaving just as everyone starts to panic. Memorable, if not exactly successful. But don't think for a second that Suleiman's adventures were limited to the land. The Ottoman Empire was as much a maritime powerhouse as it was a land-based one, and for that, Suleiman needed a man who knew his way around the waves. Enter Barbarossa, the legendary admiral whose name inspired fear and awe in equal measure. With a beard that probably doubled as an extra sail, Barbarossa was the kind of guy you'd want on your side in a naval battle, or at least to tell you a good sea shanty. Barbarossa turned the Mediterranean into the Ottomans' personal swimming pool, capturing key ports and wreaking havoc on European fleets with the kind of flair that made pirate legends look tame. But even he wasn't immune to the occasional maritime mishap. Ships were lost to storms, and navigation errors turned some expeditions into impromptu vacations on the wrong coast. These weren't just hiccups, they were full-on belly laughs in the saga of Ottoman naval supremacy. Yet, despite the mix-ups and the mighty weather tantrums, Suleiman's campaigns expanded the empire's reach. They were more than just territorial gains, they were statements of power that resonated across Europe. The Ottomans weren't just expanding their borders, they were reshaping the very map of European diplomacy. Suddenly, every European monarch was recalculating their chess moves, with Suleiman as the grandmaster they couldn't ignore. The economic realities of these conquests were as complex as a Byzantine mosaic. Sure, there were spoils of war, but maintaining an empire of this magnitude wasn't cheap. It involved a delicate balance of trade, tribute, and taxes that could make an economist weep. The Ottomans controlled key trade routes, making them the medieval equivalent of a toll booth operator with a monopoly. This wasn't just about enriching the empire. It was about wielding economic influence like a finely tempered sword. European powers, recognizing the economic clout of the Ottomans, had to dance a fine line between confrontation and cooperation. Diplomatic missions turned into theatrical productions, with European envoys often arriving at the Ottoman court like starstruck fans at a rock concert, hoping to win favor or at least leave with their heads intact. Suleiman, ever the shrewd negotiator, played these diplomatic games with the finesse of a maestro directing an orchestra. Despite the challenges and the occasional setback, Suleiman's reign was a testament to the power of vision and ambition. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was a leader who understood that the true strength of an empire lay not just in its armies, but in its ability to adapt, to bend without breaking. And while the siege of Vienna may have ended in retreat, the lessons learned were invaluable. After all, even in failure, there's a certain magnificence to be found, especially if you're Suleiman, and every move you make is a step in crafting a legacy that would echo through the annals of time. But enough about Suleiman's military escapades. Let's talk about something that won't get your boots muddy, law and order. Now, before you start snoring at the mention of legal reforms, trust me, the canon might just surprise you. Think of it as the Ottoman Empire's answer to a mashup between Judge Judy and the West Wing. Suleiman, always the overachiever, decided that his empire needed a legal codex that would harmonize traditional Islamic laws with the kind of pragmatic governance that made his empire tick like a Swiss watch, if Swiss watches were invented yet. The canon was Suleiman's piece de resistance in the art of legal reform. It wasn't just about laying down the law. It was about crafting a system that could handle the complexities of an empire that stretched over 3 continents. The Ottoman Empire was like a multicultural mosaic where Turks, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, Arabs, and more lived side by side, each with their own customs, languages, and occasional disagreements over who made the best baklava. Suleiman's genius was in understanding that a one-size-fits-all approach to law was about as effective as using a spoon to eat spaghetti. In its essence, the canon filled in the gaps where Sharia law was silent, addressing the nitty-gritty details of daily governance. It was like the ultimate FAQ section for running an empire. Need guidance on property disputes? The canon had you covered. Wondering how to handle tax collection without causing a riot? The canon was your go-to guide. Meting out justice in a way that was both firm and flexible, it was a legal symphony with Suleiman as the conductor. ensuring that each section played in perfect harmony. But let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. Bureaucracy in the Ottoman Empire could be as tangled as a bowl of noodles, and some of the punishments listed in the canon were, let's say, a bit outdated. Picture this. A thief caught in the act might find themselves with a hand missing, not exactly your modern-day idea of restorative justice. It's the kind of legal absurdity that makes you thankful for appeals courts and defense lawyers today. Yet, for all its quirks, the canon represented a forward-thinking approach to governance. Suleiman understood that an empire wasn't just built on conquests and poetry. It needed a foundation of laws that could withstand the test of time. His legal reforms balanced justice with mercy, order with flexibility, and tradition with innovation. It's no wonder the Ottomans called him Kanuni, the lawgiver, because let's face it, Suleiman, the guy who really nailed legalese, doesn't quite have the same ring to it. Now, let's take a moment to peek behind the silken curtains of Suleiman's personal life, where his legal acumen met its match in the form of one Roxolana, also known as Sultan. Talk about a power couple. Roxolana, a former Ukrainian slave who rose to become Suleiman's legal wife, was the kind of woman who could charm a sultan while plotting a political strategy that would make Machiavelli proud. Her influence was as undeniable as it was scandalous. Roxolana wasn't just a pretty face in a harem. She was a political dynamo who understood the intricacies of the Ottoman court like a master chess player. Her marriage to Suleiman was groundbreaking, as sultans traditionally didn't marry their concubines. But Roxolana wasn't interested in tradition. She was interested in power, and she wielded hers with the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. Her impact on Suleiman, and by extension, the empire, was profound. Through her, Suleiman demonstrated that power wasn't just about wielding a sword or penning laws. It was also about listening to those who saw the world from a different vantage point. Her influence was felt across the empire, from the construction of charitable complexes to the subtler realms of court politics. Roxolana's presence reshaped the Ottoman harem into a political powerhouse that could sway imperial decisions. She was an advisor, a confidante, and perhaps most importantly, a partner in governance. Her story is a testament to the fact that the Ottoman Empire, while a patriarchal society, was not immune to the sway of a clever, ambitious woman. Meanwhile, in the bustling marketplaces and vibrant streets of the empire, Suleiman's legal reforms were playing out in real time. Merchants haggled over spices and silks, while farmers bartered their produce, all under a framework of laws that aimed for fairness. The canon, by standardizing weights and measures, helped ensure that a pound of saffron in Istanbul was the same as a pound of saffron in Cairo. It was the kind of economic regulation that today would have economists nodding in approval, when they weren't marveling at the sheer audacity of it all. Suleiman's reign was a balancing act, a tightrope walk over an empire that was both dazzling and daunting. By crafting the canon, he did more than just establish laws. He laid down a blueprint for governance that was both firm and flexible, just like his empire. And in doing so, he underscored the idea that true leadership isn't just about commanding armies or penning poetry, but in understanding the complex tapestry of human society and weaving it into a cohesive whole. As we turn the page on Suleiman's legal legacy, the story of his reign continues to unfold with lessons about power, governance, and the ever-present dance between tradition and change. Stay tuned, because the Ottomans under Suleiman were just getting started, and their story promises more twists, turns, and tales of magnificence than any epic saga could contain. So, just as we were gearing up for more tales of Suleiman's grand legal symphony, let's slide into the softer, yet equally strategic, world of romance and intrigue. Enter stage left, Roxolana, the Sultan's not-so-secret weapon of influence, who knew how to play the game of thrones long before it was cool. Roxolana, or Sultan, as she became known, was a force of nature wrapped in silk and ambition. Her journey from a Ukrainian slave girl to the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire isn't just a rags-to-riches story. It's a masterclass in maneuvering through a world where the stakes were as high as the Topkapi Palace itself. She caught Suleiman's eye and heart, not just with her wit and charm, but with a keen political mind that would rival any Machiavellian strategist. Now, it's easy to romanticize their relationship as a tale of love conquering all. And sure, there were probably a few candlelit dinners, and stolen glances across the court. But let's not ignore the pragmatic undertones. Roxolana understood that in the Ottoman court, love was as much about alliances as it was about affection. Her marriage to Suleiman broke with centuries of tradition where sultans never married their concubines. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a seismic shift in court politics, the equivalent of flipping the chessboard when you're already winning. What about those palace intrigues, you ask? Well, imagine a soap opera where the stakes involve not just broken hearts, but potential decapitations. Roxolana's influence at court was a double-edged sword. On one hand, she was a patron of the arts, commissioning masks and charitable complexes that left a lasting cultural legacy. On the other, her rise disrupted the status quo, and not everyone was ready to roll out the red carpet. The harem, traditionally a place of leisure, became a hotbed of political maneuvering. Roxolana excelled here, turning the harem into a de facto council of influence, much to the chagrin of those who preferred their politics without a side of pillow talk. And then there was the matter of succession. The Ottoman succession, a delightful blend of familial loyalty and cutthroat competition. You see, Roxolana wasn't just interested in sitting pretty in the palace. She had her eyes set on securing her children's future. Her son, Selim Roman II, would eventually inherit the throne, but not without a few, shall we say, bumps along the way. Selim, often remembered as Selim the Sart for his fondness for wine, wasn't exactly the poster child for Ottoman ambition. His rise to power was less about his own achievements and more about Roxolana's strategic mind. The succession wasn't a baton passed smoothly. It was more like a game of musical chairs with poisoned seats. Roxolana maneuvered her sons into positions of power, ensuring that her line would continue to rule. And while Selim's reign would later be marked by a few too many goblets of the good stuff, his ascension was a testament to Roxolana's political foresight. But let's not get too bogged down in the family drama. The cultural boom under Suleiman was as grand as the Sultan himself. This was the golden age of the Ottoman Empire, where art and architecture flourished like tulips in an Istanbul garden. Suleiman, with Roxolana's support, was a patron of the arts, commissioning works that would make the Renaissance blush. The empire became a melting pot of artistic expression, with influences from across its vast territories. Architect Sinan, the Michelangelo of the Ottoman world, was crafting masterpieces that darted the skyline, each one more impressive than the last. The Suleimani Mosque in Istanbul, completed in 1557, wasn't just a place of worship. It was a statement of imperial grandeur, a structure that seemed to defy gravity with its enormous dome and intricate design. It was Sinan's love letter to the empire, and Suleiman was more than happy to sign it with his seal of approval. Literature, too, saw a renaissance of sorts. Poets and scholars found a welcoming court in Suleiman's Istanbul, where their works were not just appreciated, but actively encouraged. This was a time when a well-turned phrase could earn you a place in the Sultan's good graces, and a clever poem could be your ticket to fame, or at least a decent meal. The empire was alive with creativity, testament to the idea that even in a world of swords and shields, the pen could indeed be mightier. Yet, as with all periods of cultural flowering, there were the inevitable challenges. Balancing the demands of an empire while nurturing the arts was never going to be easy. Economic pressures were always lurking in the shadows, a reminder that all this grandeur came with a hefty price tag. Maintaining the empire's vast territories required a treasury that could keep up with its ambitions, and Suleiman's financial acumen was as crucial as his military prowess. So, as we delve deeper into the personal and political world of Suleiman and Roxolana, it's clear that their story is more than just a historical footnote. It's a tapestry of ambition, love, and legacy, woven through with threads of artistic brilliance and political cunning. The intrigue of their court was matched only by the splendor of its creations, a legacy that continues to captivate our imaginations today. And as we prepare to explore the next chapter of Suleiman's reign, we're reminded that history, much like the Ottoman Empire itself, is a living, breathing entity, full of surprises, contradictions, and a few lessons we could all stand to learn. Stay tuned, because the tale of Suleiman's legacy is far from over, and it promises more twists and turns than any tapestry could contain. As we prepare to explore the next chapter of Suleiman's reign, we're reminded that history, much like the Ottoman Empire itself, is a living, breathing entity, full of surprises, contradictions, and a few lessons we could all stand to learn. And so, the curtain falls on the life of Suleiman the Magnificent in 1566, a man whose legacy is as complex as the empire he ruled. It's a tale of grandeur and grit, of soaring achievements shadowed by the inevitable decline that follows any golden age. When Suleiman died at the ripe old age of 71, a remarkable feat in the 16th century, when most folks considered themselves lucky to make it past 40, he left behind an empire at its zenith in terms of territory, but teetering at the precipice of future challenges. Let's start with the obvious. Suleiman's death marked the end of an era. The empire he bequeathed to his successors stretched from the sunlit shores of North Africa to the eastern edges of the Persian frontier, encompassing roughly 2 million square miles. That's about the size of modern-day India, all held together by the sinews of military might and the glue of administrative genius. But here's the rub. As any empire builder worth their salt knows, expanding an empire is one thing. Keeping it intact and prosperous is another beast entirely. Suleiman's conquests had been spectacular, yet they had also sowed the seeds of future strife. The Ottoman Empire, like a glutton at an all-you-can-eat buffet, had perhaps bitten off more than it could chew. Maintaining such vast territories required an administrative apparatus as complex as a Byzantine puzzle. Bureaucracy ballooned, and as any veteran of office politics can attest, more paperwork rarely results in smoother operations. Suleiman's successors would find themselves trapped in a labyrinth of red tape, desperately trying to keep the machinery of empire from grinding to a halt. And let's not forget the economy. The economy, always the silent partner in any grand historical narrative. Suleiman's reign had seen the empire's coffers swell thanks to the spoils of war and the control of lucrative trade routes. The Ottomans were the toll collectors of the Silk Road, the gatekeepers of the Mediterranean. Yet, the very success of these conquests also led to a bloated bureaucratic system that was as expensive to maintain as it was inefficient. Inflation began to rear its ugly head, a consequence of the influx of New World silver into the European economy, and the Janissaries, those elite troops once the pride of the empire, became more of a financial burden than a military asset. This economic strain was mirrored by political challenges. Suleiman's legal reforms, while visionary, had also created a rigid system that left little room for the sort of creative problem-solving required in times of crisis. His death opened the door to a succession of sultans who, let's say, lacked their predecessors' brilliance and charisma. Selim Roman II, Suleiman's son and heir, took the throne with more interest in the empire's wine cellars than its war rooms. This isn't just a cheap shot at Selim's reputation. It's a significant factor in the gradual erosion of the empire's prestige and power. Of course, no discussion of Suleiman's legacy would be complete without acknowledging the myths that have come to surround him. Picture this: Suleiman as the ultimate Renaissance man, a ruler who could write a killer sonnet, reform a legal system, and lead a charge into battle, all before lunch. It's a tantalizing image, but like all myths, it glosses over the less glamorous realities. Suleiman was indeed a poet, a lawgiver, and a warrior, but he was also a man who executed his own son in a bid to quell rumors and secure his succession. His reign, while marked by cultural flourishing, was also one of brutal power politics, as ruthless as any Game of Thrones plotline. Yet, the allure of Suleiman's story persists, a testament to our perennial fascination with figures who embody both the light and dark of human nature. In modern pop culture, he has been romanticized and dramatized, from TV series to historical novels, each one adding another layer to the legend. This isn't just idle entertainment. It's a reflection of our desire to find heroes and villains in our past, to see history not as a dull recitation of dates and events, but as a rich tapestry of human drama. But let's not leave things on a purely romantic note. It's crucial to recognize the hard truths of Suleiman's empire-building endeavors. His vision of a world-spanning Ottoman empire was as much about power as it was about poetry. It was a vision that demanded constant vigilance, a never-ending balancing act between expansion and consolidation. Suleiman's legacy, then, is a reminder of the dual nature of leadership, the ability to dream big and the necessity to grapple with the gritty details that make those dreams a reality. In the end, Suleiman the Magnificent's reign is a study in contrasts. It was an age of unprecedented artistic and architectural achievements, yet one fraught with the harsh realities of governance. It was a time when the empire stood as a beacon of power and culture, even as the seeds of its decline were being sown. The legacy of Suleiman is not one of unblemished glory, but rather a testament to the complexities and contradictions inherent in any human endeavor. So, as we wrap up our journey through the life and times of Suleiman the Magnificent, we're left with a portrait of a ruler who was as multifaceted as the empire he forged. His story is a reminder that history is not just about the rise and fall of empires, but about the people who dared to shape them, for better or worse. And as we look back on this towering figure of the Ottoman past, we're reminded of one simple truth. In the grand sweep of history, even the most magnificent of legacies is, in the end, a very human story. You're standing in the heart of Persepolis, the ancient Persian capital, where opulence is as common as grains of sand. It's early morning, and the city hums like a marketplace orchestra tuning up for the day's performance. Vendors shout, hawking their wares with the passion of 1,000 infomercials. This isn't just any market. This is the central hub of a vast empire, and here the Silk Road has deposited its treasures, like a careless millionaire scattering gold coins. Your senses are under siege. The air is a heady mix of exotic spices, cinnamon, cardamom, and the unmistakable floral punch of saffron. Ah, saffron, this little red thread is more precious than gold, and just as likely to be clipped from your purse as that overpriced latte you're nursing back in the 21st century. Back then, a pound of saffron could set you back about 15 silver coins. Adjusted for inflation, that's like shelling out hundreds of bucks for a tiny tin of luxury. And yet, it's the crimson jewel of Persian cuisine. So here you are, considering which internal organ to sell to afford it. But spices aren't the only thing on offer. Herbs tumble over the edges of baskets. Coriander, mint, tarragon, each promising to transform your otherwise drab meal into a feast fit for the great king himself. These aren't just any herbs. They are the backbone of a cuisine that's been shaped by the world's greatest trade route. Thanks to the Silk Road, the culinary map here reads like a who's who of the ancient world. Now, let's talk about Zoroastrianism, the spiritual compass guiding your culinary choices. Picture the Zoroastrians as the original influencers, dictating what's hot and what's not in the kitchen. They have some strong opinions about what you should put on your plate. Meat is a go, but it's got to be the right kind. No carrion, no pork, and definitely nothing that's been hanging out with a corpse. You see, purity is a big deal, not just in your soul, but in your stew. The Zoroastrian dietary laws also mean that every ingredient has to be fresh and ethically sourced. Imagine a food supply chain that rivals Whole Foods in its insistence on quality, but without the eye-watering price tag. Well, maybe that's a lie. Saffron still costs a fortune. But the point is, there's a system, a sophisticated network that ensures the best produce lands on your table. It's not just about feeding the belly, it's about nourishing the spirit. In this bustling market, the range of ingredients is mind-boggling. You've got rice from the east, nuts from the north, and fruits from the south. It's an ancient Persian version of a global village, where each stall is like a chapter in a culinary encyclopedia. And behind this vibrant scene is a supply chain that operates with the precision of a Swiss watch. Goods move from farm to table with an efficiency that would make even modern logistics companies envious. But here's the kicker. All these ingredients aren't just about filling your stomach. They are political tools. The great king knows that the way to a citizen's heart is through their stomach, and he's leveraging it like the master strategist he is. The rich flavors and diverse dishes are a testament to an empire that thrives on trade and diplomacy. So, as you navigate this ancient grocery store, take a moment to appreciate the sheer complexity of it all. Every spice, every herb, every grain of rice tells a story of conquest, trade, and cultural exchange. And while you might not have a shopping cart to wheel around, you've got a mental list of ingredients that would make any Persian chef proud. As the sun climbs higher, merchants start to pack their stalls with the precision of a seasoned traveler fitting an oversized carry-on into the overhead bin. The market begins to settle into a steady rhythm, the chaos of the morning giving way to the more subdued hum of midday trading. You, armed with your newly acquired ingredients, are ready to tackle the culinary challenges of the day. But for now, take a moment to savor the sights and sounds of the market, a living, breathing testament to the power and reach of an ancient empire. Armed with your market hall and a head full of historical tidbits, you make your way to a noble household that could rival a modern luxury hotel for its opulence and the number of people it feeds. Now, the word breakfast might conjure images of leisurely brunches with avocado toast and lattes, but in ancient Persia, it's a whole different ballgame. Here, breakfast is both a communal event and a logistical challenge that would make a project manager break out in a cold sweat. As you step into the bustling kitchen, the first thing that hits you is the heat. We're talking serious heat, like being hugged by a sauna that's had a bad day. The heart of this kitchen is the earthen oven, a marvel of ancient technology that's been slow-cooking bread and roasting meats long before the invention of the air fryer. These ovens, known as tanners, are crucial for baking the flatbreads that form the backbone of every meal. Think of them as the ancient world's answer to the question, what's for breakfast? Now, let's address the myth of the grand Persian feast, a spread so lavish it could put the average Instagram foodie's dream to shame. Sure, those feasts happened, but they were more of a special occasion thing. For the day-to-day, the focus was on practicality and sustenance. The sheer volume of food required for a noble household is staggering. Picture this. You're feeding not just the family, but a small army of servants, workers, and hangers-on. It's less a dinner party, more a small village breakfast rush. So, what does breakfast look like in this culinary whirlwind? Well, it starts with the bread, of course. Bread is life, quite literally, in ancient Persia. It's the foundation of the meal, the edible plate that holds everything together. But making bread here isn't a simple affair. It involves a team of cooks who know their way around dough like a Formula One driver knows the racetrack. They work in a rhythm that's part dance, part battle, as they knead, roll, and slap the dough against the hard walls of the tanner. It's a spectacle that combines artistry with sheer brute strength. And let's not forget the sheer quantity of flour involved. We're talking sacks upon sacks of grain, ground to a fine powder in stone mills that have been churning since the crack of dawn. It's not just a matter of dumping some flour in a bowl and calling it a day. The grain has to be sifted, the dough kneaded, and each piece carefully baked to perfection, a process that could rival any modern bakery in its complexity. But bread is just the beginning. The Persian breakfast table is a tapestry of flavors and textures. There's yogurt, thick and creamy, made from the milk of goats or sheep that graze on the fertile pastures outside the city. Add to that a selection of cheeses, perhaps flavored with herbs from the garden. And don't even get me started on the jams and preserves. These are the real stars of the show, bursting with the sweetness of figs, dates, and pomegranates, each jar a testament to the culinary creativity that thrives in this kitchen. Now, if you're expecting to wash it all down with a cup of coffee, I've got bad news for you. Coffee won't make its grand entrance onto the world stage for another millennium or so. Instead, you're more likely to find a refreshing jug of water or some fermented barley drink that's as close as you'll get to a morning pick-me-up. It might not be your go-to-caffeine fix, but it gets the job done. The real magic, though, lies in the spices. This is where ancient Persian cooks really flex their culinary muscles. Saffron, cinnamon, and cardamom weave their way through the dishes, turning even the simplest meal into a fragrant feast. These spices are what elevate breakfast from mere sustenance to an experience, a culinary journey that takes you from the farms of Persia to the spice markets of India and beyond. But let's not sugarcoat it. Running a kitchen like this is no small feat. The logistics alone could make your head spin. Imagine coordinating dozens of cooks, each with their own specialty, in a dance that must result in a meal fit for a king. It's a challenge that requires not just skill but diplomacy, as cooks jostle for space and resources in a kitchen where the stakes are always high. And yet, despite the chaos, there's a kind of beauty in it all, a sense of purpose and community that binds the cooks and the household together. In a world where every meal is a testament to the empire's reach and influence, breakfast is more than just the first meal of the day. It's a celebration of culture, trade, and the art of cooking itself. So next time you sit down to your morning toast, take a moment to appreciate the legacy of those ancient Persian kitchens. Because behind every slice of bread, every spoonful of yogurt, lies a story of culinary adventure and innovation that continues to shape the way we eat today. And remember, even in the grand halls of Persepolis, Breakfast was never just a meal. It was an event, a chance to start the day with a taste of the empire. So, with your taste buds still savoring the remnants of that Persian breakfast extravaganza, let's mosey on over to the heart of the empire's culinary theatre, the royal court. Here, food is more than sustenance. It's a high-stakes game of diplomacy and status, where a misstep with a soup ladle can have consequences as dire as a barch treaty. Welcome to the lunch rush, Persian style. In the grand halls of Persepolis, the midday meal is not just a chance to fill your stomach, it's a full-blown spectacle. Imagine a banquet hall the size of a football field, filled with mosaics so intricate they make your grandmother's quilt look like a doodle. The great king, who might as well be the original influencer, presides over this ritual like a maestro, conducting a symphony of flavors and power plays. Let's set the stage with some culinary patchwork. The royal chefs are the empire's secret weapons, wielding ladles instead of swords. Their job, to craft dishes that speak the language of politics, using ingredients to whisper sweet nothings to foreign dignitaries or to assert dominance over a rebellious satrap. We're talking culinary diplomacy at its finest. These feasts are legendary, and not without reason. Picture a table groaning under the weight of delicacies from every corner of the empire. The Persian appetite is as vast as its territories, with dishes featuring lamb that could give any modern Michelin-starred restaurant a run for its money. And those saffron-infused rice dishes, they're more than just a feast for the eyes. They're a gold-plated ticket to the king's favor. Remember, in ancient Persia, your seat at the table and the quality of the grub on your plate could make or break your career. But before you get too carried away with visions of endless luxury, let's sprinkle in some reality. While the royal court indulges in banquets fit for guards, the common folks are having a decidedly more modest affair. Think of it as the ancient Persian version of Lunchables, simple, nutritious, and far from opulent. The midday meal might include some hearty flatbreads, a dollop of yogurt, and perhaps a handful of dates if they're feeling fancy. The disparity in dining experiences isn't just about wealth. It's a carefully curated system of social hierarchy. In the empire, what you ate said a lot about who you were. A noble's table would boast a variety of meats and spices, whereas the commoners had to make do with legumes and whatever herbs they could scrounge up. It's like comparing a 5-course meal to a PB&J sandwich, and this culinary divide is as deep as the empire is wide. Now, let's talk numbers. Feeding the royal court was no small feat. Historians estimate that a single banquet could involve up to 15,000 people. Yes, you heard that right. We're talking about a guest list longer than a CVS receipt. Imagine the logistics. Hundreds of cooks, servers, and musicians all working in perfect harmony to create an atmosphere where every bite is a power move. And while we're debunking myths, let's tackle the idea of the endless feast. Sure, these banquets were grand, but they weren't a daily occurrence. They were more like the Super Bowl of dining events, reserved for celebrations, diplomatic visits, or when the king really wanted to show off his empire's culinary prowess. But why go to all this trouble? Because in ancient Persia, food was a tool of statecraft. The great king knew that a well-fed ally was a happy ally, and a happy ally was less likely to revolt. It's the age-old strategy of keep your friends close and your enemies fed. These banquets also served as a platform for showcasing the empire's wealth and resources by flaunting an array of exotic ingredients, spices from India, wines from Greece, fruits from the Levant. The Persians were sending a clear message. Look at what we can do. It was a culinary flex that demonstrated not just the empire's reach, but also its ability to integrate diverse cultures into a harmonious whole. Yet, amid this display of opulence, the average citizen was navigating a world of simpler pleasures. Their meals reflected the resources available to them, with local grains and vegetables forming the backbone of their diet. But even in their simplicity, there was ingenuity. The common folk might not have had access to the royal court's spice cabinet, but they knew how to make the most of what they had, turning humble ingredients into flavorful, satisfying meals. So, next time you're sitting at a lavish dinner party, or just enjoying takeout on your couch, remember the Persians. They were the original masters of using food as a social lever. For them, a meal was never just a meal. It was a statement, a strategy, and sometimes a stage where the drama of empire played out in courses, not acts. Keep this in mind as we venture further into the world of ancient Persian cuisine where the next course is always just around the corner. So, with the exotic aromas of Persian feasts still teasing your senses, let's dive into the kitchen. Not just any kitchen, but the bustling heart of ancient Persian culinary ingenuity. It's afternoon in Persepolis, and we're about to unravel the secrets behind recipes that have survived the test of time, like your grandma's unbeatable cookie formula. First up, let's tackle the myth of Persian food being all about exotic luxury. Sure, there were opulent banquets that could make a modern gourmet's heart race, but the real magic lay in the everyday resourcefulness of Persian cooks. You see, Persia wasn't just about silk slippers and golden crowns. It was also about making do in a climate that was as harsh as a reality TV reunion. Summers could fry an egg on a rock, and winters had a chill that would make even the bravest souls shiver. Yet, Persian cooks were the original culinary MacGyvers, turning limited resources into culinary masterpieces. Fermentation was one of their secret weapons. Yes, that ancient science of letting things sit around until they bubble and fizz like a medieval chemistry set. Take yogurt, for instance. This wasn't just a breakfast staple, it was a culinary cornerstone. Imagine, if you will, a creamy concoction that served both as a snack and a preservative. Thanks to the wonders of lactobacillus bacteria, milk transformed into a tangy treat that could last longer than a royal scandal. This wasn't just about taste, it was survival, a way to keep dairy fresh when refrigerators were as futuristic as flying cars. Persians also loved to ferment grains, creating drinks like karma, an ancestor of beer that was both a beverage and a way of life. Picture a world where water wasn't always safe to drink, and you'll understand why fermented drinks became the Gatorade of the ancient world. They hydrated, nourished, and let's be honest, took the edge off a long day of empire building. And then there were preserved foods, the unsung heroes of Persian cuisine. When you're living in a land that can flip from desert to snow globe in a heartbeat, preserving food isn't just sensible, it's essential. Pickles, dried fruits, and salted meats were as common in Persian pantries as leftovers in a college dorm fridge. Dried apricots, for example, weren't just snacks. They were little orange nuggets of sunshine, bursting with flavor and nutrients long after their fresh counterparts had disappeared with the seasons. But let's not forget the spices. Oh, the spices. While today we might take a dash of cinnamon for granted, back then, these spices were the equivalent of culinary gold. They weren't just used to flavor food. They were medicinal, preservative, and sometimes even currency. Think of them as the Bitcoin of the ancient world, except they could also make your dinner taste incredible. Now, let's debunk the myth of Persian dishes as being nothing but exotic fare. Sure, a dish like fesenjan, chicken or duck cooked with ground walnuts and pomegranate molasses, sounds like something you'd order at a five-star restaurant, but its roots are far more humble. This dish is a testament to Persian ingenuity, using local ingredients that could be stored and preserved, making it both practical and delicious. The cultural significance of these dishes can't be overstated. In a society where hospitality was as sacred as any religious ritual, serving a meal was an act of diplomacy and kindness. Sharing food was about building relationships, whether you were sealing an alliance or simply welcoming a neighbor. And while we're on the topic of cultural significance, let's not overlook the role of bread. This staple wasn't just a food item, it was a social equalizer. Whether you were a king or a shepherd, you were breaking the same bread. The art of bread making was so revered that bakers were considered artisans, their skills passed down through generations like a family heirloom. Now, you might be wondering about the economics of it all. How did they afford these ingredients, especially the pricey spices? Well, trade was the lifeblood of the Persian Empire. The Silk Road was a superhighway of goods, ideas, and culture, and Persia was its bustling rest stop. Spices came from India, silk from China, and gold from wherever it could be found. This trade network ensured that even the most exotic ingredients were within reach, provided you had the coin. Speaking of coin, let's not forget that food was also a status symbol. In a world where your power was as much about perception as reality, what you served at your table was a reflection of your wealth and influence. The rich and powerful showcased their status through banquets that displayed the empire's reach and resources. It was less about indulgence and more about sending a message. After all, who could challenge a ruler whose table groaned under the weight of the world's finest fare? Yet, amid all this culinary showmanship, The common folk were crafting their own food narratives. Their meals may not have had the same opulent flair, but they were equally significant. They relied on grains, legumes, and vegetables, with meat reserved for special occasions. Their ingenuity lay in their ability to create delicious, nutritious meals from what they had, proving that necessity truly is the mother of invention. So next time you whip up a meal using whatever's left in your pantry, remember the Persians. They were the original masters of culinary adaptability, turning scarcity into abundance with a dash of creativity and a sprinkle of spice. Their legacy isn't just in the dishes that have survived, but in the spirit of innovation that continues to inspire cooks around the world. And with that, our Persian culinary journey continues. Stay with us as we explore more of the flavors, techniques, and stories that have shaped one of history's most remarkable cuisines. There's plenty more to uncover, and we're just getting started. Now, as the sun dips below the horizon, casting Persepolis in a golden glow, we find ourselves at the cusp of the evening meal, the grand finale of a day drenched in flavors and history. In the ancient Persian household, dinner isn't just a meal. It's a culinary curtain call, a chance to savor the empire's bounty under the stars. Let's dive right into the heart of this evening spectacle. Picture a courtyard alive with activity, like a bustling beehive where every cook knows their role in this nightly drama. Unlike the midday feasts designed to dazzle dignitaries, dinner is more intimate, yet it retains a hint of theatrics that would make any Hollywood producer nod in appreciation. The centerpiece of this meal, a dish that has traveled through time to tantalize modern palates, kebabs. Yes, those skewered delights that you might associate with summer barbecues have their roots deep in Persian soil. But these aren't your run-of-the-mill kebabs. They're a testament to the Persian art of marinating, a technique that involved bathing meat in a symphony of flavors, yogurt, saffron, and a touch of citrus from the Seville oranges, which were as precious as a Game of Thrones spoiler. Now, let's sprinkle in some cold, hard facts. The meat on your skewer might have been lamb, but beef or chicken could also make an appearance, depending on what was available. And if you think this sounds like a menu option at your local Mediterranean restaurant, you're not wrong. The influence of Persian cuisine has seeped into modern culinary landscapes like a well-brewed cup of tea. From the fragrant biryanis of India to the succulent kebabs of the Middle East, the Persian imprint is unmistakable. But why did these culinary traditions endure while others faded into the annals of history? Well, it boils down to practicality and adaptability. Persian cooks were the Mac Jivers of their day, transforming whatever ingredients were at hand into dishes that could withstand the test of time and taste. The techniques they pioneered, like slow cooking and marinating, weren't just about flavor. They were about sustainability and making ingredients stretch like a yoga instructor at a retreat. As the evening unfolds, let's not ignore the role of herbs, those leafy green magicians that could elevate a dish from mundane to magnificent. Dill, mint, and parsley weren't mere garnishes. They were integral players in the culinary orchestra, and their influence has spread far and wide, from the tabbouleh of Lebanon to the chimichurri of Argentina, proving that even the smallest leaf can leave a big impression. But let's talk about dessert because, let's face it, no meal is complete without a little sweetness to cap it off. The Persians had a penchant for sweets that would make any dentist cringe. Honey was the sweetener of choice, drizzled over everything from pastries to fruits. And then there were the confections like baklava, which, despite causing countless debates over its origins, undeniably owes a nod to Persian innovation. These desserts weren't just about indulgence. They were about showcasing the empire's reach, with ingredients like almonds and pistachios traveling thousands of miles to land on Persian tables. Now, as we bask in the afterglow of this culinary journey, let's debunk a few myths lingering like unwelcome guests at a dinner party. First, the idea that ancient Persian cuisine was uniformly lavish. Sure, for the elite, meals were a chance to flaunt wealth and influence. But for the average Persian, dinner was more about sustenance than spectacle. Think hearty stews made from lentils and vegetables, nourishing and practical, a far cry from the decadent spreads of the royal court. And what about the romantic notion of Persian dining as a leisurely affair, with courses stretching into the wee hours? The truth was more pragmatic. While the nobles could afford to linger over their meals, the common folk often had to eat quickly and efficiently. They were the masters of the quick meal long before fast food became a thing. It's a reminder that life in ancient Persia was as much about surviving as it was about savoring. So, what's the takeaway from this flavorful odyssey? It's that Persian cuisine, like the empire itself, was a mosaic, a blend of traditions, techniques, and tastes that came together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. The legacy of Persian cooking is a testament to human creativity and resilience, a reminder that great cuisine doesn't just fill the stomach, it feeds the soul. And as we wrap up this exploration, let's acknowledge that while we may romanticize the past, it's essential to see it through clear eyes. The grandeur of Persian cuisine wasn't just in its flavors, but in its ability to bring people together, to forge connections across cultures, and to create a lasting impact that continues to resonate today. So, next time you dig into a dish with Persian roots, take a moment to appreciate the history on your plate. It's more than just a meal. It's a story, one that's been simmering for centuries, waiting for you to take that first bite. And as you savor the flavors, remember that you're part of a tradition that spans continents and centuries. A delicious reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered, one meal at a time. Your eyelids flutter open to a ceiling painted with scenes of triumph and battle. Because why start your day without a reminder of ancient glory and warfare? Welcome to the court of Darius, the Great, circa 500 BCE, where every morning is a spectacle of opulence, intrigue, and more silk than your modern closet has ever seen. You're not in Kansas anymore. You're in Persepolis, the nerve center of the Achaemenid Empire, sprawled out across more than 2 million square miles. Now, let's talk about waking up like Persian nobility. Forget your humble alarm clock's digital beep. Here, you're gently roused by the soft light filtering through the intricate latticework of a window that probably cost as much as a small village. You roll out of your luxurious bedding, woven from the finest Egyptian cotton, naturally. This isn't just a bed. It's a statement, a declaration of wealth that whispers, I'm important enough not to care about the price of imported fabrics. First stop, the grooming chamber, where the morning routine is a blend of vanity and ritual. You're greeted by a fleet of servants, each with a singular purpose. One brings a basin of water, another holds a towel, and there's a specialist for every kind of comb. Your hair is oiled and styled with precision, not an errant strand in sight. This isn't just about looking good, it's politics. Appearances here are currency, and you're about to drop a fortune. Enter the world of Persian perfumes, a sensory overload that could knock out a modern nose conditioned to think eau de cologne is fancy. These scents are concocted from flowers, spices, and oils imported from as far afield as India. The cost, let's just say your average citizen's yearly wage wouldn't cover a single vial. But who's counting when you're making history smell this good? And there's the silk. Oh, the silk. You don't just wear clothes in ancient Persia. You wear status, stitched into every luxurious fold. A single garment might involve silk from China, dyed with Tyrian purple from the Levant, each thread a testament to a trade network that spans continents. Don't even get me started on the embroidery, gold and silver threads woven into patterns that are both dazzling and dizzying. Before you strut out into the day, a quick word about the architecture that frames your life here. The palace complex of Persepolis is a marvel of engineering and artistry, with columns that soar like the ambitions of those who commissioned them. Built on a grand terrace, it's a fortress of stone and metaphor. These walls have ears, and probably eyes too, given the sheer number of spies lurking around. The architecture is designed to impress and intimidate in equal measure, a reminder that you're in the presence of a superpower. But let's not forget the human element in this grand tableau. The hierarchy here is a labyrinthine affair, a social Jenga tower where one wrong move could send you tumbling. The court is brimming with satraps, nobles, and military commanders, each armed with their own agendas and ambitions sharper than any sword. You think office politics are bad? Try navigating this sea of intrigue without a GPS. Stakes are high and the margins for error slim. Darius himself sits at the apex, a man whose resume reads like a checklist of conquests. He's the king of kings, not just because it sounds cool, but because he's got a whole empire of lesser kings under his thumb. His word is law, and his whims, well, they make weather patterns look predictable. But let's circle back to you, standing there in your sumptuous attire, smelling like a garden of Babylon. What's the catch, you ask? Well, everything you've donned, every scent you've applied, is a double-edged sword. Yes, it elevates you, but it also marks you as a player in a game where the rules are as fluid as the perfume you're wearing. Here, luxury is both a privilege and a trap, as precarious as the balance of power in this sprawling empire. So there you are, primed and polished, ready to face a day in the Persian court. The sun streams in, casting long shadows that seem to whisper secrets from the past. You're about to step out into a world where every look, every gesture is laden with meaning. Just remember, in a place where appearance is everything, you're only as good as your last impression. Good luck keeping up with the Achaemenids. You'll need it. As you glide into the heart of the Persian court, still basking in the glow of your morning routine, you're immediately greeted by the buzz of a political hive. This isn't just another day at the office. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of intrigue, and you're about to grab a heaping plateful. Welcome to the morning meeting, where the empire's movers and shakers gather to play their daily game of chess, minus the actual board, but with plenty of pawns. Let's talk satraps, the underappreciated linchpins of this massive, sprawling empire. These regional governors are as much a part of the political landscape as the mountains and rivers of the realm. Imagine being a satrap. It's like running your own mini-kingdom, with all the perks and pitfalls. You've got tax collectors to manage, rebellions to quash, and public works to oversee. And if you thought your boss was demanding, try pleasing Darius I, whose idea of a light workload involves administrating one of the largest empires the world has ever seen. Darius wasn't just a king. He was the CEO of Persia, Inc., and his business model was diversification. The empire was subdivided into about 20 satrapies, each contributing to the imperial treasury and military. But don't get too romantic about this unified empire. It was more like a patchwork quilt stitched together with diplomacy, coercion, and the occasional sword. The satraps were Darius's middle managers, ensuring the far-flung corners of the empire didn't fray at the edges. Now, every empire needs its intelligence network, and Darius was no slouch. Enter the king's eyes and ears, the original secret agents. Picture the CIA, but with more flowing robes and less paperwork. These loyal operatives roamed the empire, reporting directly to the king about everything from satrapal misdeeds to local gossip. They were the silent sentinels, ensuring no one got too comfortable or powerful, including the satraps themselves. In essence, Darius's administration was a masterclass in realpolitik, or the art of the political possible. His decisions were guided by pragmatism, not idealism. Take taxes, for example. They weren't just a way to fill the coffers. They were a tool for control. By adjusting tax rates, Darius could reward loyal provinces and punish rebellious ones. It's the carrot and stick approach, with gold and silver as the carrot, and well, you can guess the stick. Darius's genius lay in making the complex look deceptively simple. He standardized weights and measures across the empire, which might seem like a small feat, but it was akin to getting everyone to agree on one time zone today. Chaos averted by sheer administrative will. And the Royal Road. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a broadband connection, allowing for quick communication and troop movement over 500 miles from Sardis to Susa. In short, the empire ran like a well-oiled chariot, but with a constant need for maintenance. Of course, all this organization served a larger purpose, keeping Darius securely on the throne. The king might have projected an image of absolute power, but behind the facade was a man juggling fragile alliances and potential insurrections. The empire was a house of cards, and Darius was the ace holding it all together, with satraps and spies as his high-value cards. But let's not forget the human element amid all this bureaucracy. The court was more than just a place for policy debates. It was a living, breathing organism, teeming with ambition and rivalry. The satraps were political animals, each one maneuvering for power and favor in a world where allegiances shifted like desert sands. Forget reality TV. This was the original drama series, complete with betrayals, alliances, and the occasional exile or execution to keep things spicy. Amidst the grandeur of Darius's achievements, it's easy to romanticize the Persian Empire as a harmonious entity. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find a realm constantly on the brink of fragmentation. The satraps were often as much a threat as they were an asset, each with enough power to challenge the center if the right conditions emerged. It was a delicate balance, and Darius's true genius was in maintaining it through a mix of rewards, punishments, and good old-fashioned surveillance. In the grand theater of Persian politics, everyone played a part, but not everyone got a happy ending. The stakes were high, and today's ally could become tomorrow's adversary. Yet, amid the power struggles, there was an undeniable appeal to the game itself. It was a world where wit and strategy mattered as much as wealth and birthright, a testament to the enduring allure of power and the lengths to which people will go to grasp it. So here you are, navigating the treacherous waters of Persian politics, where each smile hides a dagger and every handshake is a potential trap. You've got your work cut out for you, trying to keep your head above water in a sea of ambition and intrigue. Just remember, in a place where everyone's playing the long game, you'll need more than a good poker face to survive. Hold onto your silk robes, because the day is just getting started, and in the court of Darius, anything can happen. It's noon in Persepolis, and you're about to discover why lunch at the Persian court is less about sustenance and more about spectacle. Forget your sad desk salad. This is a culinary extravaganza designed to flaunt the empire's reach and resources. Here, dining is theatrical, a high-stakes production where every course is a power move. Step into the grand hall, where tables groan under the weight of dishes sourced from across the empire. You're not just eating lunch. You're consuming a geography lesson. Imagine tasting fish from the Mediterranean, honey from Anatolia, dates from Babylon, and rice from Bactria, all in one sitting. The logistics are mind-boggling. Think of it as an ancient version of Amazon Prime, but instead of 2-day shipping, it's a network of trade routes and caravans stretching from Susa to Sardis and beyond. Now, before you start romanticizing this smorgasbord, let's talk economics. Each bite you take is a testament to the empire's vast trade network, yes, but also its staggering expenditure. The cost to maintain such a lavish lifestyle, astronomical. Darius had a treasury that could make Scrooge McDuck's vault look like a piggy bank, yet even he had to balance the books. Feeding the court wasn't just about keeping bellies full. It was a political statement, a way to keep satraps and nobles loyal and impressed. Here's where the myth-busting comes in. While Persian opulence is legendary, it came at a price, literally. The empire's wealth didn't just appear out of thin air. It was extracted from its subjects through taxes that would make your modern tax return look like a light reading. The empire was divided into about 20 satrapies, each contributing a hefty sum to the royal coffers. But these weren't just arbitrary figures. They were carefully calculated based on the region's productivity and potential. It's like having an accountant who's also a mind reader. The burden of these taxes was felt most acutely by the common folk, the farmers and artisans whose labor funded the opulence of the few. Imagine working from sunrise to sunset, only to see a significant chunk of your earnings whisked away to fund a feast you'd never even glimpse. It's the classic tale of Robin Hood in reverse, with the rich taking from the poor to fund their own indulgences. Yet, despite the burden, the system was surprisingly stable, a testament to Darius's administrative acumen and the empire's vast resources. But back to the feast. As you navigate the banquet, you're not just filling your plate, you're playing a game of social chess. Seating arrangements are a masterclass in Persian hierarchy. The closer you are to the king, the more important you are. It's like musical chairs, but with higher stakes and no music. Every glance, every toast, is loaded with meaning. You're not just dining. You're navigating a web of alliances and rivalries that could shift with a single misplaced word. In the midst of this culinary theater, it's easy to get swept up in the romance of it all. The exotic flavors, the vibrant colors, the intoxicating aromas. It's a sensory overload that could make even the most jaded courtier pause in appreciation. Yet, beneath the surface, there's a harsh reality. This is a world where appearances are everything, and appearances, as you'll quickly learn, are expensive. Consider the spices that perfume the air. They're more than just flavor enhancers. They're status symbols, each one a testament to the empire's reach. Saffron from Persia, cinnamon from India, pepper from Southeast Asia. Their presence on the table is a reminder of the empire's economic prowess and the intricate web of trade that sustains it. But those spices didn't come cheap. They were worth their weight in silver, a luxury that only the elite could afford. Now, let's talk about the ripple effect of these feasts. The economic impact wasn't confined to the court. The demand for exotic goods fueled trade and stimulated markets across the empire. It was a boon for merchants and traders, whose caravans crisscrossed the empire's vast expanse, bringing prosperity to the regions they touched. Yet this economic activity was a double-edged sword. While it enriched some, it also widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots, a disparity that would eventually sow the seeds of discontent. As you sit there, savoring a dish that's traveled thousands of miles to reach your plate, it's hard not to marvel at the sheer scale of it all. The Persian Empire was a marvel of logistics and administration, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Yet for all its grandeur, it was a fragile construct, a delicate balance of power and politics that required constant upkeep. So here you are, dining in the heart of an empire that stretches from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, a realm built on trade and taxes, on the sweat of its subjects and the foresight of its rulers. The feast is both a celebration and a reminder of the empire's might, a tableau of power and plenty that masks the underlying tensions. You're part of a grand narrative, a story of ambition and excess, of wealth and want, where every meal is a microcosm of the empire itself. As the feast draws to a close and the courtiers begin to disperse, you're left with a lingering sense of awe and unease. The Persian court is a world of contradictions, where opulence and austerity coexist, where the line between luxury and necessity is as thin as the silk you're wearing. It's a world that defies simple categorization, a tapestry of overlapping narratives and competing interests. And as you rise from the table, you can't help but wonder what tomorrow will bring. In a place where fortunes can change with the flick of a wrist and alliances are as fluid as the wine in your cup, one thing is certain. In the court of Darius, the only constant is change. So hold onto your gilded goblet and prepare for whatever comes next. Because in this Game of Thrones, the stakes are as high as the columns of Persepolis, and the only sure bet is that nothing stays the same for long. As you meander away from the feast, head spinning from the heady mix of spices and political machinations, you find yourself swept along with the tide of courtiers heading towards the throne room. It's time for the afternoon session at the heart of the Persian Empire's might, the king's court. This is where the real magic happens, or as some might say, where the real illusions are crafted. Picture this: Darius the Great seated on his throne, a figure of regal authority flanked by his advisors. It's a setup that screams power, but also something subtler, strategic theater. You see, the court isn't just a place where decisions are made. It's where the empire's image is meticulously curated. It's all about optics, darling. The room is a cacophony of color and culture, showcasing the empire's vast reach. You've got emissaries from Egypt rubbing shoulders with dignitaries from India, each one here to pay homage, and more importantly, tribute. Now, let's talk tribute. A term that sounds like a polite exchange, but often feels more like a shakedown. Every province sends its best, a veritable parade of regional specialties that speak volumes about Persia's sprawling dominion. Gold from Lydia, spices from India, and livestock from the heartlands of Mesopotamia make their way to Persepolis, a vibrant display of wealth and diversity. It's like a global market, minus the haggling, and with a lot more ceremonial bowing. But let's not romanticize this too much. While it's tempting to see these exchanges as harmonious celebrations of cultural diversity, the reality is less picturesque. Tribute was not just a gift, it was a symbol of subjugation, a reminder of who held the reins in this vast empire. The provinces weren't just shipping their goods out of goodwill, they were compelled by the threat of force. It's like being invited to a party where the entrance fee is your dignity, a subtle yet powerful method of control. The legal system here is equally fascinating, a blend of fairness and force that keeps the empire ticking. Darius was known for his administrative genius, but let's not kid ourselves. The system was as much about maintaining order as it was about dispensing justice. The king's court was the final arbiter, a place where disputes could be resolved and grievances aired, provided, of course, you had the right connections to get your case heard in the first place. Justice for all. More like justice for those who could afford the travel expenses to Persepolis. In this context, Persian diplomacy shines, or perhaps glows ominously. Darius was a master of the carrot and stick approach, a diplomat who understood that a well-placed olive branch could be just as effective as a drawn sword. He knew that an empire held together by force alone is as stable as a house of cards in a gusty wind. So, he made a show of tolerance, allowing different cultures within his realm a modicum of autonomy, provided they didn't rock the boat too much. But behind the facade of tolerance lay a sophisticated network of control. The empire's famed postal system, for instance, wasn't just a means to deliver messages. It was the ancient equivalent of Big Brother, a way to keep tabs on the far-flung corners of the empire. Those eyes and ears of the king, they were everywhere, ensuring that any whiff of dissent was swiftly snuffed out. So, while the empire might have projected an image of a benevolent overlord, the reality was more Orwellian than utopian. And yet, there's a strange allure to this world of power and politics. Watching the court in session is like witnessing a finely tuned orchestra, each player knowing their part and the consequences of a missed note. It's a dance of diplomacy where every word is weighed and every gesture calculated. The stakes are high, but so too is the reward for those who can navigate these treacherous waters. As the afternoon progresses, you can't help but marvel at the sheer scale of it all. The Persian Empire is a testament to human ambition and the lengths to which people will go to wield power. It's a realm of contradictions, where opulence and austerity exist side by side, and where the line between diplomacy and domination is as blurred as the horizon on a desert evening. So, here you are, standing in the epicenter of ancient politics, a world where appearances are everything and reality is a carefully crafted illusion. Yet, amid the grandeur and the games, there's a lesson to be learned about the nature of power, a reminder that it's as much about perception as it is about possession. In the court of Darius, where every move is a calculated risk, you're left to wonder who really holds the cards and who's just playing along. As the session draws to a close and the players begin to disperse, you're reminded of the fragility beneath the empire's formidable facade. It's a world where the stakes are as high as the columns of Persepolis, and the only certainty is that nothing stays the same for long. So hold onto your silk toga and prepare for whatever comes next. In this grand game of thrones, the power dynamics are as fluid as the wine in your cup, and the only sure bet is that the dance will continue, each step as deliberate and dangerous as the last. As the grand theater of courtly power plays wraps up, you might think the day is winding down. But in the Persian court, the real drama often unfolds after the curtain falls. You see, the court of Darius was less a sanctuary and more a pressure cooker, where the steam of ambition could scald you if you weren't careful. Here, the line between power and peril is thinner than a silk thread. Let's dive into the fate of those who fell out of favor. In a world where alliances were as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake, one misstep could send you toppling from the heights of power to the depths of despair, or worse, the afterlife. Exile was the more merciful option, a kind of ancient version of being unfriended, but with a side of banishment to some distant corner of the empire. You might find yourself in a place where the local delicacies include more sand than spices, all because you backed the wrong satrap or dared to speak your mind. But for those truly out of luck, execution was on the menu. The Persians were equal opportunity when it came to inventive ways of dispatching those who crossed the king. One of the more infamous methods was the Persian version of crucifixion, known as the boats or scaphism. Picture this: 2 boats, a victim sandwiched between, left to the mercy of the elements, and worse, insects. Not exactly the retirement plan you'd hoped for, right? Let's not forget the ever-watchful eyes and ears of the king, the original surveillance state. They ensured any whiff of sedition was swiftly snuffed out. The fate of Bessus, the satrap who betrayed Darius's successor Alexander the Great, is a case in point. His execution wasn't just a punishment, it was a statement, a billboard advertising the cost of betrayal in vivid, grisly detail. Now, before you start romanticizing the nobility's life as one of endless feasts and silk-laden luxury, think again. The reality was far from a gilded fairy tale. Court life was a high-stakes game where every smile could mask a dagger, and every ally might be tomorrow's adversary. It was a world where power was like holding a live wire. Exhilarating, yes, but one wrong move, and you're fried. The romantic image of Persian royalty often glosses over these harsh truths. While the architecture, art, and opulence paint a picture of a sophisticated civilization, the human cost of maintaining such grandeur is often swept under the proverbial Persian rug. The empire was a marvel of organization and cultural fusion, a tapestry woven from the threads of countless peoples and traditions. It was also a realm built on the backs of those whose stories are lost to history. As the shadows lengthen over Persepolis, you're left to ponder the legacy of Darius and his empire. The Achaemenid Empire was a prototype of globalization, a realm that connected East and West long before the term Silk Road was coined. Its legacy influenced countless cultures, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of history. But survival in such a court required more than just luck. It demanded cunning, resilience, and the ability to read the shifting sands of political fortune. It's no wonder that the court of Darius was a crucible for some of history's most legendary figures, from the king himself to those who would dare to challenge his reign. So, as you reflect on your whirlwind day in the Persian court, consider this. Behind every legend lies a reality often more brutal and complex than any myth. The grandeur of the Achaemenid Empire was a testament to human ambition, but also a reminder of the fragile balance between power and peril. In the end, the story of Darius and his court is a cautionary tale about the seductive allure of power and the high price it exacts. As the day in ancient Persia comes to a close, you're left with a deeper understanding of why the court of Darius was both a marvel and a menace. It was a world where each day was a dance on the edge of a blade, where every decision was fraught with consequence. And as you drift into sleep, perhaps you'll find comfort in the thought that, though history may repeat itself, at least you're not the one trying to keep up with the Achaemenids. Sweet dreams. Back in the day when the Byzantine Empire was at its peak, the world was a bustling mosaic of cultures, trade routes, and the occasional sword swinging. You know, the usual. Now, if you ever wanted to see what it looked like for an empire to embrace bling before it was even cool, Byzantium was your go-to hotspot. Picture a city where everything from church domes to the emperor's favorite slippers was likely to be encrusted with gold leaf. The Byzantines had a thing for gold. If it wasn't gilded, it probably wasn't worth their time. At the heart of this empire was its capital, Constantinople, today's Istanbul, if you're mapping it out on Google Earth. Founded by Emperor Constantine in AD 330, this was the place where East met West, not just for a casual lunch, but for some serious economic and cultural exchanges. We're talking about a city that spanned over 1,000 years, saw more invasions than a Game of Thrones kingdom, and yet thrived as a hub of wealth and innovation. This wasn't just a city, it was a statement. The Byzantines weren't just hoarders of gold, they were the Silicon Valley of their time in terms of artistic and technological innovation. Their economic prowess was legendary, and for good reason. Constantinople sat smack dab in the crossroads of major trade routes, making it the ultimate medieval marketplace. From textiles and spices to precious metals, the Byzantines traded with everyone who was anyone. They had a knack for taking the best of what the world offered and turning it into something even better, like Byzantine silk, which was all the rage in the medieval world. It's like they were the original influencers, setting trends that everyone else wanted to follow. But let's not get carried away with visions of endless prosperity. The Byzantine economy was also a complex beast that required serious management. They had taxes, tariffs, and more red tape than a modern-day DMV. Their currency, the solidus, was so solid, pun intended, that it became the dollar of the medieval world, used across Europe and the Mediterranean. By the way, that's a currency that managed to stay stable for over 700 years. Beat that, Bitcoin. Art and architecture were where the Byzantines truly flexed their cultural muscles. Think of the Hagia Sophia, their architectural magnum opus. Originally built as a cathedral in 537 AD, it was the largest building in the world at the time, and boasted a dome so daring in its construction that even modern engineers would raise an eyebrow. The interior was a showcase of mosaics, some crafted with gold tiles that glittered under the flicker of candlelight. If you were lucky enough to be invited in, you'd probably spend half your time wondering if you'd accidentally walked into heaven. However, it wasn't just about religious bling. The Byzantines were pioneers in iconography, creating religious icons that were as much a theological statement as they were works of art. Icons were a big deal. Think the medieval equivalent of viral memes, but with a touch more reverence and a lot more gilding. It's no wonder these icons became a hot commodity, traded and treasured across borders. Now, all that glitters isn't gold, or at least not entirely. The Byzantines had their fair share of controversies, especially when it came to their love of opulence. The empire's wealth often drew envy and aggression from neighboring powers, leading to conflicts that were as bloody as they were inevitable. Yet, It was this very allure that made them a cultural beacon for the Islamic world. When the Islamic caliphates began to rise in the 7th century, the Byzantine Empire was the cultural juggernaut they couldn't ignore. The Byzantine influence on Islamic culture was a tale of admiration and adaptation. As the Islamic Empire expanded, it encountered Byzantine art, architecture, and administrative systems that were too impressive to leave behind. The Umayyad Caliphate, for instance, took a page out of the Byzantine book for their own architectural projects. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, completed in 691 AD, is a prime example. It drew heavily on Byzantine architectural styles, with its mosaics and domed structure, a clear Byzantine signature. But it wasn't just about borrowing architectural blueprints. The cross-cultural exchanges went deeper, right into the economic and administrative structures. The Islamic empires adopted Byzantine coinage and taxation systems, realizing that the Byzantines hadn't just been hoarding gold. They'd been managing it with a finesse that made Scrooge McDuck look like an amateur. The Byzantine system of provincial governance also influenced Islamic administration, as it was both efficient and adaptable, a must-have for any empire worth its salt. While the Byzantines were known for their Christian orthodoxy, their cultural footprint was surprisingly secular in the influence it cast. Islamic scholars were keen to absorb Byzantine knowledge in fields like medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The works of ancient Greek philosophers, preserved and expanded upon by Byzantine scholars, became a foundation for Islamic intellectuals. It's as if the Byzantines handed over the intellectual torch, sparking a flame that would illuminate the Islamic Golden Age. In the grand tapestry of history, the Byzantine Empire didn't just leave a footprint, it left a golden leaf impression. Its cultural and economic power was a key player in shaping medieval Islamic culture, proving that sometimes the best connections are the ones forged in the fires of gold leaf and intellectual curiosity. So, while today's influencers might have millions of followers, the Byzantines had empires watching their every move. Not a bad gig, if you can get it. As the early Islamic caliphates cast their gaze upon the Byzantine Empire, they saw more than just a rival. They found a cultural and administrative treasure trove, ripe for the picking. It was like walking into a medieval IKEA, where the Byzantines had already assembled the best bits of governance and design, and all you needed was an Allen wrench and some ambition to take it home. The Islamic conquests of the 7th and 8th centuries weren't just about expanding territory. They were about cultural encounters, some friendly, others about as warm as a polar bear's embrace. The Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, the big players on the Islamic stage, were particularly keen on appropriating Byzantine administrative practices. Think of it as the original office makeover. The Byzantine bureaucracy was a well-oiled machine. The caliphates were eager to ditch the old tribal system for something more, well, Byzantine. They adopted the Diwan, an administrative office structure that was essentially the Byzantine civil service, rebranded with an Arabic name. Now, if you've ever tried to rebrand anything, you know it's not all glitter and glam. The transition required some serious political finesse. The Islamic rulers had to balance the caliphate's core values with the pragmatic efficiency of Byzantine systems. This was no small feat, like trying to mix oil and water while keeping everyone convinced they're drinking the finest cocktail. But the results were impressive. The Diwan helped streamline tax collection, military organization, and governance, ensuring the caliphates ran smoother than a well-crafted Byzantine mosaic. Speaking of mosaics, the Islamic world couldn't help but be dazzled by Byzantine art and architecture. The Umayyad caliphs, for example, were like kids in a candy store, their eyes wide with the possibilities of Byzantine bling. The Dome of the Rock is a case in point. Built under Caliph Abd al-Malik, it was more than a religious statement. It was a cultural flex. The dome's intricate mosaics and lavish decor were clear nods to Byzantine artistry, showing that even when it came to holy sites, a little opulence went a long way. But let's not sugarcoat it. While the Islamic world admired Byzantine aesthetics, it wasn't exactly a case of see it, want it, get it. There was more than a little push and pull. The early caliphs had to contend with religious scholars who were wary of Byzantine influences, concerned they might taint the Islamic cultural essence. Yet, those early caliphs were as shrewd as they come, understanding the value of Byzantine artistry in projecting power and prestige. They used art and architecture as a way to communicate the caliphate's legitimacy and divine favor, much like the Byzantines had done. It was a visual language that needed no translation. And here, dear listeners, is where we debunk a myth or two. The idea that the Islamic world mindlessly copied the Byzantine Empire is about as accurate as saying a cover band is the same as the original. The caliphates were selective, adapting what suited their needs while discarding elements that didn't fit their narrative. The adoption of Byzantine motifs was a strategic choice, not a sign of cultural inferiority. It was about picking up the best tools available and reshaping them to suit a new vision. Now, let's talk economics, because surprise, surprise, wars and empires don't fund themselves. The Byzantine solidus had been the gold standard, literally, for centuries. It was stable, reliable, and accepted across borders. The Islamic caliphates, recognizing a good thing when they saw it, didn't merely hoard Byzantine coins. They minted their own, drawing inspiration from Byzantine designs, but with inscriptions in Arabic. The dinar and dirham became the economic backbone of the Islamic world, facilitating trade and economic growth across an empire that stretched from Spain to India. This wasn't just imitation. It was an evolution of currency that would support a burgeoning economy. The caliphates also adopted Byzantine trade practices, understanding that if they wanted to be players on the international stage, they'd better learn how to play the game. The caliphs maintained and expanded the trade routes that had made Byzantium a commercial powerhouse. Goods flowed from east to west like water, with spices, textiles, and precious metals crossing borders faster than you could say Silk Road. The caliphate's strategic use of Byzantine economic principles helped them become a formidable economic force, one that could rival its European neighbors. So, what have we learned so far? The early Islamic conquests were more than just a series of military campaigns. They were a cultural exchange program on a grand scale, with the caliphates taking the best of Byzantine traditions and making them their own. This was a time when borders were as fluid as the cultural exchanges that crossed them, and the Islamic world didn't just inherit a legacy, it forged a new one. And as we continue to explore this fascinating period, remember, the story of empires is often one of adaptation as much as conquest. Keep your eyes and ears open, because the tale of Byzantine influence is far from over, and the next chapter promises even more intrigue and innovation. So, as the Byzantine and Islamic worlds were busy swapping blueprints and coins like medieval pen pals, let's dive into the real intellectual heavy lifting, the cross-pollination of ideas. Now, if you think this was some kind of utopian knowledge-sharing paradise, think again. It was more like a wild intellectual bazaar, with thinkers and scholars navigating the maze of cultural exchange and occasional miscommunication. The Byzantine Empire, with its love for all things ancient Greek and Roman, had kept the flame of classical knowledge burning through centuries of political upheaval. Their scholars, tucked away in the mosaic-encrusted halls of Constantinople, were the custodians of works by Aristotle, Plato, and Galen, to name a few. These texts were the intellectual equivalent of treasure maps, pointing to a universe of scientific and philosophical riches. Enter the Islamic Golden Age, a period that spanned roughly from the 8th to the 14th century. It was like the intellectual Olympics, with scholars from Baghdad to Cordoba competing for the gold in fields like mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, established in the early 9th century by Caliph al-Ma'mun, was a buzzing hive of translators and scholars. Picture a medieval think tank where translating a Greek manuscript into Arabic was as much a sport as a scholarly pursuit. And who were the key players in this cerebral relay race? Meet Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a Christian scholar born in 809 AD in what is now Iraq. Hunayn was the LeBron James of translation, turning Greek medical texts into Arabic with the kind of finesse that would make even Hippocrates proud. His translation of Galen's works laid the foundation for generations of Islamic physicians who would eventually leave their mark on European medicine. But it wasn't just about translating texts word for word. Oh no, that would be too easy. Islamic scholars like Al-Kindi, often called the philosopher of the Arabs, didn't just copy the Greeks. They engaged with them, critiquing and expanding upon their ideas. Al-Kindi, who lived in the 9th century, was a polymath before it was cool, dabbling in everything from philosophy to pharmacology. He was the kind of guy who'd write a thesis on Aristotle by morning and brew up a batch of herbal remedies by afternoon. In mathematics, the Islamic world took the numerical baton and sprinted ahead. Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar, penned a book in the 9th century that introduced the Hindu-Arabic numeral system to the Western world. Yes, the very same numbers you're using today to count likes on Instagram. His work on algebra, a word that comes from the Arabic al-jaba, was a game changer, laying the groundwork for everything from calculus to computer algorithms. So the next time you curse algebra, remember you're standing on the shoulders of giants. These intellectual endeavors weren't happening in a vacuum. The Islamic scholars were navigating the tricky waters of cultural synthesis, pulling Byzantine, Persian, Indian, and their own indigenous knowledge into a coherent whole. It was a bit like making a salad with ingredients from 4 different cuisines and somehow ending up with a Michelin star dish. Yet, let's not get carried away on a magic carpet of scholarly harmony. This wasn't always a smooth ride. The process of cultural integration was about as seamless as a DIY furniture assembly. Lots of instructions, a few missing screws, and the occasional urge to chuck the whole thing out the window. Scholars had to contend with linguistic barriers, differing philosophical traditions, and the sometimes skeptical gaze of religious authorities. The famed Islamic scholar Al-Farabi, known for his works on political philosophy and metaphysics, had to walk a fine line between advocating for reason and respecting Islamic orthodoxy. And speaking of integration, let's not forget the messy realities of politics. While the scholars were busy translating and debating, the political landscape was as volatile as a medieval stock market. The Byzantine Empire and Islamic caliphates were often at each other's throats, literally and metaphorically. This rivalry meant that intellectual exchanges were sometimes interrupted by less-than-friendly skirmishes. Yet, despite the political turbulence, the flow of knowledge persisted, testament to the fact that ideas can be more resilient than borders. Now, for a bit of myth-busting. It's tempting to see this period as a seamless intellectual love fest, but the reality was far more nuanced. The process of absorbing and adapting Byzantine knowledge was selective, strategic, and often contentious. Not every Greek text made the cut. Some were seen as incompatible with Islamic thought or simply not useful. The scholars were pragmatic, valuing knowledge that could be applied to fields like medicine, astronomy, and mathematics over more esoteric philosophical musings. Still, the legacy of this cross-cultural fertilization is undeniable. It wasn't just a footnote in history. It was a chapter that would lay the groundwork for the Renaissance in Europe centuries later. As Islamic scholars absorbed and expanded on Greek and Byzantine knowledge, they set the stage for a new era of scientific inquiry and philosophical exploration. So, as we wrap up this intellectual odyssey, keep in mind that the story of Byzantine influence on Islamic culture is one of complexity and contradiction. It's a tale of rivalry and respect, of borrowing and innovation. And while the romanticized version of a seamless intellectual exchange might be more palatable, the messy reality is far more intriguing. As we move forward, the saga continues, with more twists, turns, and a fair share of historical surprises still to come. Stay tuned, because the Byzantine influence is a gift that keeps on giving, and there's plenty more to unwrap. As we leave behind the heady days of intellectual cross-pollination, let's dive nose first into the real guts of medieval economics: trade. Now, if you think medieval traders were just quaint dudes with carts of spices and silks, think again. These were the original hustlers, navigating a world where the phrase "penny for your thoughts" had a very literal meaning. The Byzantine and Islamic empires shared a love-hate relationship, but when it came to trade, they were like the frenemies of the medieval world. Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantines, was a bustling marketplace of human ambition. It sat right at the crossroads of East and West, a bit like the medieval version of Times Square, minus the billboards and questionable hot dog stands. Let's talk numbers, my dear history buffs. By the 6th century, Constantinople had a population of about 500,000 people, making it one of the largest cities of its time. Imagine a city where traders from Europe, Asia, and Africa rubbed elbows, swapping goods, stories, and maybe the occasional plague. It was a place where the exotic silks of China and the fragrant spices of India found their way into Byzantine hands, only to be sold for a handsome profit. Silk, in particular, was the Instagram influencer of its day, a status symbol draped across the shoulders of anyone who was anyone. The Byzantine Empire didn't just import silk. They became the Prada of the medieval world, producing their own high-quality silk after some crafty monks smuggled silkworm eggs out of China in hollowed-out walking sticks. Talk about a covert operation. They spun those threads into the finest garments, charging prices that would make even the most extravagant Gucci sharper blush. The Islamic caliphates, meanwhile, were no slouches in the economic arena. By the 8th century, the Abbasid Caliphate had established Baghdad as a major trade hub. With a population rivaling that of Constantinople, Baghdad was a cosmopolitan city where Persian, Indian, and Greek influences blended like the perfect cup of medieval chai. The Caliphate controlled trade routes stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, turning the Silk Road into their personal superhighway of commerce. And speaking of commerce, let's not forget the spices. Pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were the Bitcoin of their day, small, portable, and capable of fetching sky-high prices. A pound of pepper could cost the equivalent of a laborer's annual salary, and yet people couldn't get enough of the stuff. It seems that even back then, folks were willing to pay a premium for a little seasoning. But it wasn't all silk and spice. Ideas were traded as eagerly as goods. The Islamic world was a sponge for knowledge, absorbing Byzantine agricultural techniques and trade practices like a kid in a candy store. They took Byzantine agricultural manuals, translated them into Arabic, and then improved upon them, leading to agricultural innovations that boosted productivity. It was like taking a recipe, adding a secret ingredient, and ending up with a dish that everyone wanted to try. Now, let's tackle the myth of the idyllic merchant's life. While the romantic image of the wandering trader is appealing, the reality was grittier. Trade routes were fraught with peril, bandits, pirates, and the occasional tax-happy warlord. The constant threat of robbery was as common as barter disputes. Merchants had to be as tough as the goods they traded, ready to negotiate, bribe, or fight their way through any challenge. And let's not forget the Byzantine penchant for tariffs. Trading with the Byzantines was like trying to navigate a modern tax code, with fees and tolls at every turn. The result of these economic exchanges was a kind of medieval globalization. Goods, ideas, and people flowed between East and West, creating a network of interdependence that enriched both empires. Byzantine coins, known as solidi, were the preferred currency for major transactions, recognized from the markets of Alexandria to the bazaars of Baghdad. Meanwhile, the Islamic world's dinars and dirhams became common currency across a vast expanse, facilitating trade and economic growth. And here's the kicker. This cross-cultural trade contributed to the spread of ideas that would eventually catalyze the Renaissance. As Byzantine and Islamic traders engaged in their economic dance, they inadvertently laid the groundwork for a rebirth of classical knowledge in Europe. The books, technologies, and philosophies that traveled these routes didn't just fill libraries. They fueled a renaissance of thought that would change the course of history. So, what have we unearthed from this treasure trove of trade? It wasn't just about goods crossing borders. It was about empires exchanging pieces of themselves. The Byzantine and Islamic worlds, though often at odds, were bound together by the threads of commerce, creating a tapestry richer and more complex than any single empire could weave alone. As we prepare to dig deeper into this cultural and economic saga, remember that history is rarely a tale of simple barter and trade. It's a complex negotiation of power, influence, and survival. And as the story of Byzantine and Islamic interactions unfolds, we'll continue to uncover the deals, the disputes, and the delicious ironies that shape these empires. Stay tuned, because our journey through the medieval marketplace is far from over. As we journey further into this medieval tapestry, it's essential to understand the long-lasting legacy of Byzantine influence on Islamic culture. Like an ancient remix that left its mark on everything from architecture to governance, right down to scholarly pursuits. Picture it as a cultural cocktail, shaken and stirred over centuries, with each empire adding its own twist, leaving a taste that lingers on the palate of history. Let's talk architecture, because if you thought the Byzantines were just about domes and mosaics, you're in for a surprise. Their architectural genius became a blueprint, quite literally, for the Islamic world. The quintessential Byzantine style, with its grand domes and intricate mosaics, found a new home in Islamic architecture. Take the Great Mosque of Damascus, for instance. Built by the Umayyads in the early 8th century, it borrowed heavily from Byzantine designs, incorporating expansive courtyards and majestic arches. It wasn't just a mosque, it was a statement, echoing the grandeur of the Hagia Sophia while carving out its own identity. The Byzantine knack for blending aesthetics with functionality wasn't lost on the Islamic architects. They took these elements and infused them with their own cultural and religious motifs, creating a new architectural language. The Alhambra in Spain, with its intricate arabesques and water features, is a testament to this enduring legacy. It's as if the Byzantines handed over the stylistic baton and the Islamic world ran with it, crafting structures that spoke of power, faith, and artistic ingenuity. But architecture was just one piece of the Byzantine Islamic puzzle. Governance was another area where Byzantine influence left an indelible mark. The Byzantine Empire's bureaucratic system, with its elaborate hierarchy and efficient administration, was the envy of the medieval world. It was the medieval equivalent of a well-oiled corporate machine, complete with its own version of office politics and power struggles. The Islamic caliphates, in their quest for stability and efficiency, adopted and adapted these Byzantine administrative practices. The Diwan system, a hallmark of Islamic governance, was inspired by Byzantine bureaucracy, ensuring that taxes were collected, armies were maintained, and the empire ran like clockwork, or at least as close as you could get before the invention of Swiss watches. The influence didn't stop at governance. It trickled down to the very fabric of scholarly pursuits. The Byzantine Empire was a bastion of classical knowledge, preserving the works of ancient Greek philosophers and scientists during times when such texts could have easily been lost to the sands of time. Islamic scholars, ever the intellectual adventurers, seized these works with enthusiasm, translating and expanding upon them with a zeal that would make even the most dedicated bibliophile proud. This cross-cultural intellectual exchange didn't just preserve classical knowledge, it transformed it, laying the foundations for the Islamic Golden Age. Consider the works of Aristotle and Plato, which found new life in the hands of Islamic philosophers like Al-Farabi and Avicenna. These scholars didn't just translate, they engaged in a dialogue with the ancients, critiquing and building upon their ideas. It was a bit like a medieval TED talk, where the speakers were separated by centuries, but united in their quest for knowledge. This intellectual renaissance wasn't confined to philosophy. It extended to astronomy, medicine, and mathematics, fields where Islamic scholars would leave a legacy that would eventually fuel the European Renaissance. Now, let's pause for a moment of myth-busting. There's a romantic allure to the idea of a seamless cultural exchange, where Byzantine and Islamic worlds held hands and sang a medieval version of Kumbaya. But reality, as always, was more complicated. The relationship was one of admiration and rivalry, of borrowing and reinvention. The Islamic world didn't merely copy Byzantine models, it adapted them to fit its own needs and aspirations. This was a strategic choice, not a sign of cultural subservience. It was about leveraging the best of what the Byzantines had to offer while crafting a distinct identity. And as we reflect on these historical dynamics, it's crucial to remember the human element. Behind the grand structures and scholarly pursuits were people, traders, scholars, architects, and rulers, each navigating a complex web of cultural interactions. They were the unsung craftsmen of history, shaping a legacy that would echo through the ages. Their stories remind us that history is not just about empires and dates. It's about the individuals who dared to innovate, adapt, and dream beyond the horizons of their time. As we conclude our exploration of Byzantine influence on Islamic culture, it's worth pondering the quirks of historical narrative. History is often written by the victors, but it's also shaped by those who dared to embrace complexity over simplicity. The Byzantine and Islamic worlds, with their shared legacy of rivalry and respect, offer a rich tapestry of human endeavor, a reminder that the past is never truly past. It lives on in the architecture we admire, the governance we navigate, and the knowledge we cherish. So, as you close this chapter of historical exploration, remember that the story of Byzantine and Islamic interactions is a testament to for the enduring power of cultural exchange. It's a tale of adaptation and innovation, of empires that looked beyond their borders and found inspiration in the unlikeliest of places. And as we continue to explore the annals of history, may we do so with an appreciation for the complexities that shaped our world, a world where the echoes of Byzantium and the Islamic caliphates still resonate, reminding us that the past is not just a relic, but a living legacy.